talking about later in one, and then all of my other interests in another tab. I just think that's really awesome.
Cool. Well, then I think you'll probably like the next piece of news as well, then, Dale, which is that Opera have come up with a new browser. So this is from their website. It's also on Engadget. It's fast and lots of other places on the internet. So Opera, as we know, um, one of the old stalwarts, as it were, of browsers, been around for many years, has many different versions, I suppose you could, if you want to put it that way. And one of the ones they've come out with now is this one called Opera One, and this is an early access. So they released the early access version of it, and it's supposedly completely redesigned, and it's planned to launch for all platforms later this year. It's designed to have a cleaner look with plenty of open space for future generative AI features and extensions in its sidebar and address bar. Opera says it has implemented a new multi-threaded compositor and its new modular design principles for the browser to enable a fresh batch of features that include what it calls tab islands. And this is where the browser automatically and intuitively groups websites, people, etc., that are open based on their content. For example, it will open all pages with menus and restaurants in one island, for example, all tabs with Google Docs in another. The idea is to reduce confusion and make it easier to jump between tasks, whether for work or something personal. Opera considers tab islands as the first manifestation of its modular design strategy with their clear distinguishable island borders and color markers, so we could probably expect more similar design features. In addition to tab islands, Opera One comes with ChatGPT, ChatSonic, and AI prompts enabled by default, and it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I am actually live streaming from Opera One. This sounds like this will be something that'll be right up your street, Dale. It
Well, if you're into, see, Opera is an old browser, but it got bought by a large Chinese corporation controlled by the government, and they kicked out the guy that was designing it within a year, and that's why we have Vivaldi,
isn't
because
everything
Vivaldi is made
Chinese
by the
in some
person
way
that
linked to
originally
their
wrote it.
government, though, to be fair?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about that as others because I can just look at somebody looking at my browsing history and that and some data center or something in Qingdao or Shenzhen going, this is what this guy has no life. How can he read about the X or
Oh,
settings?
why do truck driver always looking at cats playing piano? It's no good now.
That is
It's like, yeah, it's like,
surprisingly not too bad, but also I'm pretty sure borderline racist, Bill.
yeah.
This is something we've brought up to Bill before with some of his accents.
Well, sorry,
It's better
folks.
than the Indian one last time. Flipping out, that was
Right?
terrible.
But I can see, I would actually have to check this out because I don't do as much tech support for people as I used to in the past. But I had a few friends that were using Opera and I didn't mind it. I've pretty much used several different browsers dating back to even what they had, the original Mosaic that was, I think, out of CERN. I'm not sure if Tim Berners Lee developed it, but somebody did. But yeah, on the web browser on OS2. So I've gone through a whole bunch of them. I just use Firefox just because it works for me. I've got all these devices here, and every single one of them, I can send a tab to it, open a tab there, send a tab over here, have history syncing. So as long as Opera can do all that, I actually might consider it because it does sound very handy. Because that's the biggest thing. If you could just see how many tabs I have in
Hmm.
my browser right now, and we're talking like the icons are basically one letter.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried out a lot of Opera's different types of browsers that they've had over the years. You know, they had the one there was like a data saver that you could use if you had really bad internet connections. They had this one called Opera Touch, which was optimized for one-handed use. which I used to use for a while on my Android phone.
Yep.
um and this one, I mean, as I said, I've got it up now. It's working pretty well. It's got built-in WhatsApp and Messenger and Chat GPT and stuff like that.
Oh, it's
um
built in. Oh,
and built-in VPN as well. So it looks interesting. It looks interesting. And as I said, I'm probably not the target audience for these kinds of really powerful browsers. I think a lot of it does go over my head, but it does
Now,
look pretty nice, I must say.
I,
Dale, you sound like you could really use this extension called One Tab.
one tab.
Yeah, it works really well in Chrome and Firefox both. I don't know if there's an Opera version or what other browsers would have it, but it breaks your all your tabs down into organized links, essentially,
Let
and
me
you can
put
shuffle them around,
let me put that in my brain here.
and it prevents you from having 200 open tabs.
One
I mean,
tab
Opera's based on Chromium anyway,
extension.
isn't it? So I would have assumed that Chrome web extensions would work on it.
All
Hopefully,
right.
Um,
I think I actually used Opera. I could be wrong, but I think I actually used Opera on my one of my Blackberries back then, back in the WAP days. I guess whatever the access protocol, whatever it was, mobile thing that they used before they had mobile browsing.
anyway, moving away from Browser's Corner, uh, GTK3 port of GIMP is officially finished. And this is from Phoronix. The long awaited port of the GIMP image manipulation program to GTK3 toolkit is now declared officially finished. After many years in the works, GIMP developer Z Mormont tweeted out a short time ago, and after another month, I merged the branch to our main development branch. The GTK plus 3 port of GIMP is officially finished, apart from minor deprecated APIs here and there, but no huge tasks anymore. I even already updated the roadmap, which now says port to GTK3 complete. The GIMP 3.0 roadmap now has GTK3 port listed as done, along with porting to the Meson build system, porting away from the init tool usage, and multi-layer selection. Among the items still being worked on for GIMP 3.0 are redesigning the scripts, plugin APIs, Wayland support, and space invasion. Space invasion? That sounds like anyway, it doesn't matter. Here's to hoping it won't be too much longer before GIMP 3.0 is finally ready to ship. Um, okay,
Haven't they already
stupid
rolled
question.
out GTK4?
Exactly. That's wasn't I I was just about to say that. I thought, wait a minute, have I missed something? Have I completely misunderstood? I thought we were all going to GTK 4. Yeah. Um so
Well,
obviously,
there's no
yeah, I
way
mean
it was
that's
on GTK2. I mean, it's been on GTK3. This is dubious,
No,
I
there have
say.
been large chunks of it still on GTK2. And
Oh,
now there's still tiny chunks on GTK2.
I see.
Well, some things are slow. I was just counting. There's only been 5 versions of XFCE in the past, 15 years.
yeah. That's why Joe Ressington loves it so much.
So, in Debian, everybody's like, why? People always wonder why GNOME is the default on Debian when it should be XFCE, because XFCE was I'm trying to remember back when I was using it. I think I was using 410 or 412, and I think it actually overlapped like 2 or 3 Debian releases, is how long it lasted before they got updated.
Good news, though. A recent release of XFCE added the use of a screensaver program.
Yes,
So,
I have it on. It came by default on my Void install when I was installing, changing over to OpenBox. But yeah, I noticed that 2 things that I thought were pretty impressive was the screensaver and multi-monitor support. I only have one monitor now,
that's state of the art, buddy.
but I looked at it and obviously I couldn't. Well, I could test it because I got plenty of monitors in this room, but I was kind of impressed because I was looking at these settings, and I'm like, wow, this actually looks like it could be usable.
And of course, we haven't actually needed screensavers for 20 years.
That was, I mean, that was what I was trying to poke towards. But
Well, unless they go to OLE, how do they call that? Organic light emitting diodes.
OLED.
If they
OLED.
switch OLED, thank you, thank you. Hate my sinuses, but the oh, I know what I was going to say. If they go to the OLEDs, you'll need a screensaver because they're basically plasma 2.0 as far as screen burn-in.
Well, nobody had taken the next one, so we're going to let our guest Dale do it.
But G doesn't want to take this one too.
I
He's
feel
such a-
rough ever
He's
hearing my
already
voice
got
at the minute.
tic-tac-toe. We don't need him winning any more games.
No, but he speaks so much better than I do. Because I only know English and bad English, and I'm not good at either one of them.
He
So in
actually
any
knows
case,
English. So
yeah,
he is English.
oh, I know, like like redneck, like schmatterchew, wire up, yeah. So moving on here, we got QEMU 8.0 released with 32-bit support, deprecated from Phoronix. It's a really good website for a lot of Linux news. Scroll up here. Michael Larabelle wrote, QEMU 8.0 is out today as the newest release for this processor emulator that plays an important role in the open source Linux virtualization stack. QEMU 8.0 has debuted as stable today with a range of new features and other improvements. Some of the highlights for QEMU 8.0 include QEMU 8.0 now supports Zen guest under KVM while running the Linux 5.12 kernel or newer. System emulation on 32-bit x86 hosts has been deprecated. The 32-bit x86 host support for system emulation is deemed no longer effective. Due to Intel's HAXM being retired, the Excel HAX option has been deprecated. New ARM emulated CPU types of Cortex A55 and Cortex R52. QEMU 8.0 on RISC-V, or RISC-V if you prefer, supports a number of new extensions like, good heavens, SATAEEN ZOS. It'll be in the show notes. And T-head
Now you
vendor
can see why I
extension.
didn't say this bit.
That's why they gave it. This is why Boss gave me this one. All right, and ZAWRS and T-head vendor extensions, the SVADU and the ZICOND and ZICBIOM. I feel like I'm having a reading test. ZC. Okay, well, we're going to go along.
Spelling test.
Yeah.
Svadu, Zycon, Zikbiom, Zsikbaz, and Zikbop.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that the autocorrect doesn't know what it is, so there's these red squiggly lines under it, so it is kind of hard to read. So
And everybody
anyway,
else has clicked into that area, so their names keep popping up.
oh yeah, that too. Yeah, it's like whack-a-mole with people's names. Let's see. QEMU 8.0 is also now capable of supporting ACPI on RISC-V. QEMU 8.0 adds a new CPU model for the Intel Sapphire Rapids, a new IDE-CT option for emulating a compact flash card block device, support for the F13 and F14 keys have been added for input handling. F14? F13. Okay, that's different. Didn't know that we had F13 and F14 keys. Experimental VFIO migration support for the V2 VFIO migration protocol while removing V1 protocol support. It has been many years since 32-bit x86 servers were of much use. Yeah, I don't know if they've been in some of these companies to make that bold statement. QEMU 8.0 finally deprecates 32-bit x86 host support. QEMU 8.0.0 can be downloaded at qemu.org. More details as to many QEMU 8.0 changes can be found on the QEMU wiki. And I don't know if I could say QEMU one more time.
You can, trust me. But I do want to mention that if I remember right, you can get up to like F16, and a lot of that is for like hotkeys, and there are also dedicated keys to like turn off your touchpad or various things like that.
Is that like
But
an ANSI extension?
something like that. I know that they're there because I used them with my the macro pads that I was making for a while. I still have
Okay.
some floating around, and you map them to things that aren't on the keyboard, and then you use it to, run something else. So
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
it
because
works pretty well.
I've seen a lot of keyboards over the years when I was in IT. Because some of the customers we had some Unix boxes. Some of them were like SGIs. Some of them were Ultra Sparks and stuff. So I've seen some keys that have had many function keys. People talk about the 100% keyboard size that we've got now. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
no,
need to pick up one of those old Unix keyboards. That thing can be used as a deadly weapon.
yeah,
Well, when I started this, we only had 10 F keys and they were on the left where they belonged.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, the 10 keys on the right, the function keys on the left.
Or the 8 function keys on the Commodore 64.
Do you remember before caps lock was put on the keyboard?
I do. That was back when I was typing on an electric typewriter.
Yeah, the old
That's how I
IBM
learned.
Selectras.
All right, we can tear ourselves away from QEMU. Ryzen 7000 processors are burning up. And Joe's tunneling his way out of jail. Um, and this is from How To Geek. AMD just released a new range of Ryzen 7000 processors earlier this year with 3D V-Cache providing even more performance. However, the new CPUs aren't just faster, they're burning up. Dun dun dun. Update.
Dun, dun, dun.
Update 425 to 23. AMD told the Register in a statement that the company is aware of a limited number of reports online claiming that excess voltage while overclocking may have damaged the motherboard socket and pin pads. AMD says it is working with motherboard manufacturers to ensure voltages are correct.
They are understating the case, and a number of people with these processors are actually learning to underclock them to keep their boards alive.
Some people are reporting their PCs with Ryzen 7000 3D processors suddenly not booting up with no issues arising previously. Upon further inspection, the underside of the Ryzen chip inside the PC has physically bulged and burned out, with the motherboard pins burned in the same spot. Both the CPU and the motherboards are seeing irreparable damage as a result of the issue, and it can be tricky to RMA the affected parts, since a motherboard maker could, for one, argue that the issue was caused by the CPU or vice versa. While AMD is yet to speak out on the issue, MSI issued a statement saying that the issue could be caused by abnormal voltage issues. The motherboard maker has introduced a BIOS update that heavily restricts voltage settings by only letting you reduce the voltage. and we heavily recommend that you download it if you happen to have an MSI motherboard with one of these CPUs. We should remember that AMD was initially reluctant to allow overclocking for its new CPUs with 3D V cache. This might be the reason why. Make sure to download a BIOS update whenever it becomes available for your machine. We've reached out to AMD for a comment on the issue, and we'll update this post if we hear back. And again, that's from How to Geek.
Yeah, interesting that they left that paragraph in about we'll update you later, and then they put the update in the middle of the article.
Yeah, that was. But that's how they do it sometimes, right? If you're looking right there on their blog, they're putting the latest information first. I saw that on another site today where I had heard something, and then I went looking for the link because I wanted to put it in the news, and then here's some new information all the way at the top, which makes
Okay.
you, it doesn't necessarily make you look foolish when you're reading it, but it's a little awkward. So
Proton launches encrypted password manager from the Proton blog. A password manager has been one of the most common requests from the Proton community ever since they first launched Proton Mail. However, while Proton Pass uses end-to-end encryption to protect your login credentials, it will be much more than a standard issue password manager. This will become clear over the next weeks and months as we prepare Proton Pass for a public launch later this year. In 2022, Proton joined forces with Simple Login to bring millions of Proton users advanced Hide My Email aliases. Making logins more secure, more private, and easier was a core part of the original vision of Simple Login. In fact, Sun Nguyen Kim, the founder of Simple Login, picked the name Simple Login for precisely this reason. The merger united two organizations with a shared interest in tackling this problem. That's why the Simple Login team, joined by a few engineers from Proton, spearheaded work on Proton Pass. We're launching Proton Pass now for two primary reasons. First, joining with Simple Login increased our ability to develop a new password manager without impacting efforts on our other Proton services. Second, passwords are such sensitive information that an insecure password manager is a risk to the Proton community. If an attacker obtains your password, be it through a data breach or hacking your password manager, they can essentially bypass all of Proton Mail's advanced encryption. Protecting your passwords properly requires a high level of competence with encryption and security, which few organizations have. We've always been worried about the risk posed by a major password manager breach, which unfortunately became a reality with the recent hack of LastPass. Proton Pass is not just another password manager. It's perhaps the first one built by a dedicated encryption and privacy company, leading to tangible differences in security. For example, while many other password managers only encrypt the password field, Proton Pass uses end-to-end encryption on all fields, including the username, web address, and more. This is important. This is important because seemingly innocuous bits of information, such as saved URLs, which many other password managers don't encrypt, can be used to create a highly detailed profile on you. For example, if an attacker can see that you have passwords saved for an account with Grindr, GOP.com, or even a manga fan site, they'll know a lot about you as a person, even if they can't actually access your accounts. Cryptographic details matter, and Proton Pass uses a strong bcrypt password hashing implementation. Weak PBKDF2 implementations have made other password managers vulnerable, and a hardened implementation of secure remote password for authentication. Proton Pass is also a password manager that includes a fully integrated two-factor authenticator and supports 2FA autofill. This is meant to make it easier to use 2FA everywhere, since it's one of the most effective safeguards for your online accounts. Like every other Proton surface, Proton Pass will be open source and publicly auditable upon launch, so anyone can independently verify our security features and their implementation.
Anybody going to use this?
They've already rolled out the beta to some users.
So, I mean, I use Bitwarden as my password
Yeah, me
manager.
too.
Me too.
Um, I I don't know what would make me change.
Well,
Bitwarden
from the
goes.
sound of it, they're saying that password managers don't encrypt everything between, for instance, your email and your password. That there's a gap in there that might get hacked.
Well,
What?
it's mostly tangential, however that word is, data. It's pretty much they look at it and saying, okay, we don't know his username, we don't know his password, but we know he goes to, you know, chevysomething.com. I don't know. They say you can build a profile on that person. I mean, they get that profile already from your browsing history with the cookies because the cookies know where you were. Because I know that because you can buy something on Amazon. You go to Google and let's just say I go to Amazon and you sell those lampshades that I got yesterday. I could go to Amazon and start getting ads for lampshades.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking they're, in my opinion, they're adding a checkbox because they have to differentiate themselves from another password manager. So they're saying, look, we don't just do 10,000 rounds of Diffie-Hellman on this password. We also include the notes for it, the website address, your username, how many times you visited.
I think they're going to have a tough time pulling people away from Bitwarden, even on that
Yeah.
premise, because Bitwarden is proven to be a reliable and safe option, and it's open source, which means a lot to a lot of people like me.
And
And
$10 a year.
$10 a year to host it for you and everything, So it's I've been using it for about I don't know about 2 or 3 years now, and I've just never had a single issue with it, and it's everywhere. You can put it everywhere, so everywhere from browser extensions to phone apps and everything, and it's got all the features built into it. So yeah, like Majid said, I don't know what it would take to pull me off of Bitwarden onto this. And I do use Proton. We on one of my other shows we use the Proton Plus or Premium, whatever the premium service is, where you can use your own
Yeah.
domain name and that. So I mean, I'm a fan of the product. I just don't. I don't know that. I hope they're not expecting to make a butt ton of money off of it right off the bat.
My only problem with Proton, well, before I get onto that rant, um, they also are very privacy or not private, security conscious because
Yeah.
I can sign in on my laptop and I'll get a notification within seconds that says you've signed in. Was
Yeah.
that you? But one of my little mini rant is I just think that they're like ADD, where they can't focus on one thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're coming out with updates to the calendar, and we're like, yeah, you didn't fix the thing that was in this thing over here that you said you were going to fix. And they're, oh yeah, we're gonna get, and it just
But that's
seems,
that's that's just business, isn't it? That's
yeah,
just business. I mean, you don't make money from improving what you already have. You make money by getting new services. It's the same issue that Mozilla have. Mozilla, they've got a bloody good browser that's, so many people use. But instead of concentrating on it, over the last 10 years, they did all sorts of ideas, Mozilla OS and, phones and whatever, So, I mean, I understand what you mean, but unfortunately, I think that's just kind of the nature of the beast at the minute.
I think it's a development mindset too, because if you, I think, I don't know, I think we've discussed this in the past when I used to go into Big Daddy Linux, which is now the Linux Saloon, and we've had discussions, and even I think in their Telegram group about this, where the broke won't fix. You go into GitHub, GitLab, SourceForge, and you say, when I click on this and this happens, and it's not supposed to happen. And you make that submission, and then a couple months go by, And they're like, look at all these new features. And it's like, yeah, what about the thing that's obviously broken that you didn't fix? It's more fun to innovate than it is to fix things, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that's not a slant on the developers. It's just human nature, I guess.
Cool. So, the World Wide Web becomes public. That was 30 years ago today, and it's from history.com. So, on April the 30th, 1993, 4 years after publishing a proposal for an idea of linked information systems, a certain computer scientist by the name of Tim Berners-Lee released the source code for the world's first web browser and editor. Originally called Mesh, the browser he dubbed World Wide Web became the first royalty-free, easy-to-use means of browsing the emerging information network that developed into the internet as we know today. Berners-Lee was a fellow at CERN, the research organization headquartered in Switzerland. Other research institutions like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Stanford University had developed complex systems for internally sharing information, and Berners-Lee saw a means of connecting CERN's system to the others. He outlined a plan for such a network in 1989 and developed it over the following years. The computer he used, a Next desktop, became the world's first internet server. Berners-Lee wrote and published the first web page, a simplistic outline of the World Wide Web project in 1991. CERN began sharing its access with other institutions and soon opened it up to the general public. In releasing the source code for the project to the public domain 2 years later, Berners-Lee essentially opened up access to the project to anyone in the world, making it free and relatively easy to explore the nascent internet. Simple web browsers like Mosaic appeared a short time later, and before long, the web had become by far the most popular system of its kind. Within a matter of years, Berners-Lee's invention had revolutionized information sharing, and in doing so, had dramatically altered the way that human beings communicated. And I would actually say the way that human beings are wired nowadays as well. The creation and globalization of the web is widely considered one of the most transformational events in human history. 4.4 billion people are now estimated to use the internet, accounting for over half the global population. The average American apparently spends 24 hours a week online, and I think that's an underestimate. The internet's rise has been the greatest expansion in information access in human history and has led to exponential growth in the total amount of data in the world and facilitated a spread of knowledge, ideas, social movements that was unthinkable as recently as the 1990s, and cat pics and memes and bad jokes and social media, etc., etc. Sorry, that's my little addition to the end.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely
porn.
true.
Don't forget porn.
Yes, I was trying to keep this family friendly, but okay, yeah, if you really want to go on to that.
So corn
Yes, corn.
probably makes
I am from Iowa, so
corn makes up a shocking percentage of the indexed internet.
the internet is for corn.
Yeah, it is for corn. Corn thrives on the internet.
They
We
had an
wouldn't be
entire
doing
episode of Futurama about the internet is for corn.
we wouldn't be doing this whole video thing if it wasn't for that tall, stocky plant.
I know I wouldn't be.
I remember
TMI, Bill.
I remember the first time somebody mentioned this to me when I was at the university because I used a lot of Gopher, which was basically like a menuing system, and it was basically, if you ever seen like an ncurses install of some of the Linux distros and that, or some of these applications, they use the ncurses menu. That's what Gopher looked like, and you just followed link, you just clicked and hit the navigation keys into the keyboard and all that stuff, and images would come up and stuff. And I remember when somebody in the computer lab mentioned, have you been on the web yet? I'm like, what's that? And they showed me, I think it was, I can't even, I'm not sure if it was Mosaic. It was a web browser on a Spark station. And I'm like, and I can't remember what website. I think they went to MIT. Of course, MIT and Stanford, and then we're going to have websites back then. But yeah, I can't believe it's been what did it say, 30 years?
30 years.
Wow. Stuff like that also, not just rude for making you feel old, but it's the
Well,
fact that the internet has existed 31 years or 30 years, and I
yeah.
remember before it wasn't.
Yeah.
Now, late 90s, I do remember using some Gopher, but the web was already a thing by then. And I do remember using quite a lot of Telnet to navigate between various colleges and correspond with people and get
Yeah,
information. Play MUDs. I used it to play a lot of MUDs.
all the free they called them free nets. They were
Yeah.
like the BBSs on Telnet. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
used.
then they told you that Telnet was extremely insecure, and it's like, yeah, I've known that since I started using it to spoof people's emails in the
Oh,
late
yeah.
90s.
I showed a friend who just graduated from getting an IT degree and he got his first job now, and he's gonna aspiring to be into system administration. And I was telling him about how you could telnet to port 25, and you go onto the RFC for how it works. The document is actually how the actual protocol works, and it tells you the command. So you can actually telnet IP address :25, and you could actually type like, I think like one of the commands was HELO was hello, and then you had to do like set env, and then after that was the envelope of the message, and then you had to type some other command,
Right, you
and
had to
then
build each portion of the message, and then you could send it. But yeah, you could send it from
oh
any
yeah,
email that you wanted, and it would actually almost look like it came from that if you were able to get onto the system that was hosting that email client, because then the IP address would look correct. Otherwise, the only giveaway that it wasn't from that person was the IP address.
and that's when they developed the X headers to be more of a way to try to circumvent that, to be more of a paper trail of where it came from, but there were still ways around it.
And then everybody started locking down ports 21 and 25, and yeah.
Yeah, because they, what was it? Oh, 445 was Microsoft's NFS thing. 443, I think it used 443 when they started encrypting like POP3,
I'm not sure.
something like that. Yeah, but that's when they started locking things down.
But it was fun to play with.
Oh yeah.
Well, we ought to move on. Jetpack announces end of Twitter auto sharing. Now, I added this just today, actually, because I received it uh, in a Twitter message, if you can believe it. This is from Christina P. at the Jetpack blog. Now, for people that don't know, Jetpack is a real popular extension for WordPress that basically is kind of there by default. It manages all of your metrics and provides some layers of security and usability, and it gives you, when you're signed into the WordPress interface to make changes or add stuff, that's all handled by Jetpack. So it's basically, you can think of it as a extension of and a component of WordPress. One functionality it had that we've been using on mintCast for years is the ability to automatically send a message to Twitter, or send a message through Twitter, a tweet, every time you upload a new show. That way it gets out there to the audience that new show is available. Well, as many would be aware, Elon Musk has made it difficult for people to access a third-party API to connect to that. So now Jetpack has had to stop the auto sharing. And this is the article from Christina P. at the Jetpack blog. In early April, we experienced an unexpected suspension of our Twitter API access. This access is what powers Jetpack Social, which in turn helps you automatically share your blog posts to Twitter. Though the service was restored that same day, it turned out that there were bigger changes looming on the horizon. Twitter decided on short notice to dramatically change the terms and pricing of the Twitter API. We attempted to work with Twitter in good faith to negotiate new terms, but we were not able to reach an agreement. As a result, the Twitter connection on Jetpack Social will cease to work, and your blog post will no longer be auto shared to Twitter. You will still be able to share your post to Twitter manually by pasting the post link into the body of the tweet. In addition, you can still auto share your post to Tumblr, Facebook, LinkedIn. In near future, we are adding the ability to auto share to Instagram and Mastodon. We are continuing to release new features in Jetpack Social, so keep an eye on the Jetpack blog for more updates. And the show notes has links to all these things. I thought it was important because I think a lot of podcasters that are running their show from their website, we being one of those, that one mechanism we have for letting people know there's a new episode available to go and listen to is that Twitter message that goes out. And for what seems like no better reason than just a money grab, Twitter has decided to take that functionality away effectively. Well, you could probably pay for API access, but I think the pricing on those things is probably outside of the realm of what some of these organizations are able to put up with.
Are you suggesting that Elon Musk doesn't know how to run Twitter? Shocked I am.
No,
I
we're,
tell
we're,
you,
we're
I'm
suggesting
shocked.
we're actually suggesting
Yeah.
that he doesn't know how to run any company, and most of his companies simply know how to run him.
Yeah.
I would agree, man. I'm actually quite enjoying it, actually, to be
I think
fair.
we're less suggesting it more than we're outright saying it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was being sarcastic. I
What
was
I
being
have
sarcastic.
done,
I was too. I was too.
yeah, what I've done in, well, not really in response to this, but in, I kind of saw this happening a long time ago, and I added another extension to the website that automatically posts to Mastodon. So, folks, that's where we need to be anyway. When just go start following us on Mastodon. If you can't find it, let me know, and we'll get you connected, and then you can start getting your notifications on there, and we can put Twitter in the rearview mirror. That would be just fine with me.
Twitter has been one of the worst inventions that mankind has come up with, and it's come up with quite a few bad ones
Yeah.
in, how many thousands of years. I wonder if Tim Berners-Lee hadn't thought that the internet was going to lead to Twitter. He might have decided, you know what, I might nix my project.
Can we
Seriously,
mention
the
Facebook in
cesspool
that
of
breath?
people that are on Twitter. God.
Yeah, well, Facebook.
You're not going
Facebook
to get any
is-
argument from me.
No, me neither.
No,
I think-
I mean, Facebook is bad.
No,
But
Facebook is a bunch of old people now.
Yeah, that's
And
the
it's
thing.
so full
Exactly.
of politics. It's so full of politics that it's almost unusable.
Yeah.
It's become
But it's
just a way to
still-
stay in contact with family members, so that if I need to get an
Fam-
invitation somewhere,
Family members and veterans groups.
yeah. And unfortunately, 3 fat truckers. That's I've just had to come to terms with that.
Basically, social media is horrible, and things like Discord and Telegram, and basically your updated IRC clients are much better to use.
Yeah.
Are we ready
Definitely.
to move on?
No, of course not.
Well, then I won't read the next article.
Oh no, go ahead. Read the next one.
Red Hat Black Anger from WRAL TechWire in Raleigh, North Carolina. Red Hat's decision to lay off 4% of its staff, some 800 people, has ignited calls for employees to unionize, according to international tech news site The Register and a union in France, which says the job cuts triggered, quote, black anger, end quote, within the company. Despite insolent growth and profits, up 12% in constant currency, Red Hat is laying off 4% of its employees at the end of April and maybe even more, end quote, declared Solidaires Informatique on Friday. As Red Hat employees and Solidaires Informatique union members, we reject this capitalist logic of pursuing infinite growth at the expense of workers.
Oh, come on, come rally. Sorry. My inner communist came out there. Sorry, I do apologize.
Yeah, we're not singing the Internationale on this show. Against layoffs at Red Hat, black anger, the union added. A spokesperson, quote, who asked to be identified as Heikel, end quote, told the Register it, quote, has been operating within Red Hat since 2018. Continuing the quotation, many Red Hatters were already in a union, but they had no official existence within the company, Heikel said. Right now, there are many joining unions and creating union sections around the world. Considering Red Hat's efforts in union busting, we will keep quiet about it until they feel safe to disclose their existence. End quote. There's also union representation for Red Hat workers in Ireland, he added. IBM, Red Hat's corporate parent, did report just ahead of the layoff announcement that the Hatters' sales had improved 8% in the quarter ending March 31st, but that was the smallest growth reported since IBM acquired Red Hat in 2019 for $34 billion. Red Hat CEO Matt Hicks told employees about the layoffs in an email early on Monday, April 24th. Quote, how can this measure be justified with regard to the profits of the company and the remuneration of some, end quote, the union said.
This is a lot of what I've been talking about. I don't remember if I was talking about it on this show, but all your companies are scared, even the ones that are still making massive profits. With the market shifting around the way that it has been, it is just, even when they're not in a recession, they're thinking it's just around the corner. So they're planning ahead and they're trimming the fat, and it makes it really, really difficult to be in the tech industry. And then I know a lot of my higher ups are distinctly looking at things like ChatGPT, and it's, not to replace people, but we'll see what happens in 4 or 5 years when that comes up. So,
Well, I think part of it too, regardless of this economic uncertainty, which is basically an embarrassment for all the financial gurus in the world because there is a defined definition of a recession, but I digress. A lot of this is you can have a company making billions and billions of dollars, but what happens is if they come out and say their quarterly call and say, yeah, we're projecting that we're going to have a 2% increase over our previous statement. And then 3 months later, 6 months later, they got 2%. And what happens? The shareholders are like, you promised us 3. You only gave us 2. We're going to punish you. Well, what is the most expensive part of a company's budget? Payroll,
Management.
which is on payroll. So that's what happens. They just say, oh, we need, it's pretty much like the couch cushions. Quick, we need $2 million. Where are we going to get $2 million?
our employees' pockets.
Sir, we've got 200 developers making 100,000 a year. That would make $2 million. Great idea, Smithers. Make it happen.
But we have no product without them, sir.
Yeah, well, we get back to the whole Twitter thing.
That's a worry for next year.
Yeah,
We just
that's
need to
not
make the
their
projects
problem.
look good
It's not on
right
their
now.
spreadsheet.
Right. At the end of the year, all your firings happen. You trim the fat. It makes you look good for 10 minutes, and then you hire probably the exact same people right back.
Well, it's like, what was it? The guy that runs Facebook. Can't remember his
Zuckerberg.
name. Zuckerberg. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg. He quoted in an earnings call saying, "Yeah, we hired too many people over the pandemic, so we have to get rid of them."
Yeah, I remember that.
An exact quote.
That's business.
Yep.
Well, I remember a couple years ago, I bought $30 worth of Meta stock, and within 6 months, it had dropped by 50%, and it hasn't recovered. I thought the stupid people would be buying Meta stock no matter what, and I don't know.
Everything's down, Moss. Everything. It's not, you know, indicative of the growth of Meta or anything like that. Literally, all the stocks they're down. I mean,
Not
I've watched
entirely
my
true. I got
okay.
most of, I more than half the stocks I bought got to be more than 100% of what I paid for them, so I cashed them out. But everything that's left, I have to wait for it to recover. Anyhow, we are anti-competitive liberals on this show, and we should probably go to security and privacy.
Next up in security and privacy, there's Moss.
Molvad subjected to search warrant, nothing to find, cops left, from the Molvad blog. On April 18th, at least 6 police officers from the National Operations Department, NOA, of the Swedish police visited the Molvad VPN office in Gothenburg with a search warrant. They intended to seize computers with customer data. In line with Molvad's policies, such customer data did not exist. Molvad argued they had no reason to expect to find what they were looking for, and any seizures would therefore be illegal under Swedish law. After demonstrating that this is indeed how the service works and them consulting the prosecutor, they left without taking anything and without any customer information. If they had taken something, that would have not given them access to any customer information. Molvad have been operating their VPN service for over 14 years. This is the first time their offices have been visited with a search warrant.
Seemed
That is interesting. And you said Molvad was one of the lowest cost VPNs and had what was it?
Well,
WireGuard all set up.
yes, it has WireGuard. It's not one of the lowest costs, but if you can only afford to pay month by month, it's the lowest cost.
Hmm.
They don't have annual fees. They don't have 2-year fees. You just get month by month, and that way they don't have to keep any customer data on you.
That's
and
interesting.
this is the service that Mozilla puts their little package on top of. I'm not sure
Well,
what Mozilla adds to it, but
I'm
What, the
still
Mozilla
using
VPN?
PIA for now.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. On the back end, it's Molvad, and I've never used Molvad by itself. In fact, to be honest,
We
I
used
hadn't
it for
heard
a
of it.
couple of years at least, and it never let us down.
I
It was
used
easier to use. It had a Linux app, which most of the other VPNs don't.
Yeah, that was the thing. I used Trust.zone because I mean it worked, but you had to add the configurations into Network Manager yourself. There was no little third-party app or anything to go.
I haven't used it for a while. I think it's €6 a month. It might be 5.
So what are you using these days?
Right now, I am unprotected. I keep trying to talk my wife into paying the extra money for a VPN on Proton, and I really would feel more comfortable going back to Molvad, but I haven't talked her into that yet.
Well,
So, I
once
mean,
we steal Majid's iPlayer account information, then you'll have a reason to have a VPN to, the UK.
I mean, I used to use ExpressVPN because I saw some reviews and it looked like it was good, so I took it. And it was a bit on the expensive side, relatively speaking. I saw, but it had apps for everything and it worked absolutely fine. Um, Now I moved over to NordVPN, but for some reason it was a little bit, I don't know. I found the speeds weren't that great. And so I then got Surfshark. I find it weird that I've got two VPNs, but anyway.
I was on
And
Surfshark
now
for a
they're
while,
kind of owned by each other as well. Anyway,
but
Surfshark
all
works
three
really
of
well.
those are owned by a marketing company too, so you don't know how motivated they are to keep your user data private.
I mean, Surfshark works quite well,
Yeah.
and it has a decent Linux app. It has a Android app. It has all the other things. The weird thing I found, and I think it must be something to do with my ISP, my internet service provider. But even accessing VPN websites to download the clients has become really difficult. It's like I think a lot of them have realized And so I sometimes have to get a free VPN like Windscribe or Proton, because Proton have a few free tier, just so that I can then get onto the NordVPN website or the Surfshark website and get their VPN client, which is really weird.
You just
I'm
got to
not going to
change your
use.
DNS to something else and then
Yeah,
use.
most of the time I'm not going to use their client anyway. I'm just going to use their config file. I'm going to use OpenVPN.
Hmm.
Well, I
But,
really enjoyed using
I just find it
Mulvad.
odd.
Surfshark was easy to use and was a lot cheaper than Mulvad if you buy a 2 or 3 year plan. But Mulvad was by far, well, there's only two major VPNs that are not owned by a marketing corporation or a former malware company, and those are Proton and Mulvad. And they are the more expensive VPNs, but maybe there's a reason for that.
I remember the other reason why I bought ExpressVPN. You could pay in Bitcoin.
And we all know how secure that is.
Exactly.
Trust Zone did that too, and I fell into that trap for a while. You'd make your payment and then sit there for half an hour and wait for one of the
The
miners to pick
blockchain
it
to
up.
update. Yeah.
The amount of money I've lost in crypto is scary.
I'm there with you. I'm there with you. But are you comparing that to how much you put into it or how much you had in it because it went up?
So basically, my crypto strategy, as it were, has been to do the worst of all worlds, which is buy when it's really high, then sell when it tanks because you're going, oh my God, I'm losing all this money.
That,
My
that,
wife's going to kill me. And then
that's how you
six
play the
months
stock
later,
market.
realizing you should have kept it because now it's gone much higher again. So, yeah.
Look, I've been sitting on it for like 3 years now, waiting for it to come back.
There's a guy I work with. He's now my boss actually, but he used to be he was a fellow doctor with me, and he was really well into this, into all of this kind of stuff. And he used to tell me, and he used to be eerily accurate with his predictions on this, that, and the other. And I remember the last time he said, I think, what did he say? November 21. I think he said November 21. There's going to be a big fall, and I went, yeah, all right. And then I saw it slowly fall in November 21 and thought, I'll just hang on for a little bit longer. In the meantime, he took all his money out and was, quids in. Me, on the other hand, it kept on tanking. And before I knew it, I was like, should have just done what John said.
Well,
Yeah.
at one point I did think about selling down to one of the ones that were $1, stable at $1. And then, not long after that, I'm really glad I didn't because it was Terra, I
Oh,
believe, which
yeah.
was
Terra and Luna and all that. Oh, God.
that tanked.
Well, back
Yeah.
to
So
VPNs. Mulvad is €5 per month. A 1 year plan is €5 per month, and a 1 decade plan is €5 per month. So,
yeah,
it
all right. Next story. RTM Locker's first Linux ransomware strain targeting NAS and ESXi hosts. This is from the Hacker News. The threat actors behind RTM Locker have developed a ransomware strain that's capable of targeting Linux machines, making the group's first foray into the open source operating system. Its Locker ransomware infects Linux, NAS, and ESXi hosts and appears to be inspired by Babook ransomware's leaked source code. UpTVCS said in a new report published Wednesday, it uses a combination of ECDH on curve 25519 asymmetric encryption and ChaCha20 symmetric encryption to encrypt files. RTM Locker was first documented by Trellix earlier this month, describing the adversary as a private ransomware as a service provider. It has its roots in cybercrime group called Read the Manual that's known to be active since at least 2015. The group is notable for deliberately avoiding high-profile targets such as critical infrastructure, law enforcement, and hospitals so as to draw as little attention as possible. It also leverages affiliates to ransom victims in addition to leaking stolen data should they refuse to pay up. The Linux flavor is specifically geared to single out ESXi hosts by terminating all virtual machines running on a compromised host prior to commencing the encryption process. The exact initial infector employed to deliver the ransomware is currently unknown. It is statically compiled and stripped, making reverse engineering more difficult and allowing the binary to run on more systems. Upticks explained, the encryption function also uses pthreads, aka POSIX threads, to speed up execution. Following successful encryption, victims are urged to contact the support team within 48 hours via talks or risk getting their data published. Decrypting a file locked with RTM locker requires the public key appended to the end of the encrypted file and the attacker's private key. The development comes as Microsoft revealed that vulnerable papercut servers are being actively targeted by threat actors to deploy CIOP and Lockbit ransomware. I always get the fun ones. Isn't it great? Okay. If nobody has anything to add to that, let's finally move on to the bi-weekly wanderings. It's only been an hour and 20. First up, me. It's been a fun couple of weeks. I got some 3D printing and design done, but first I had some fun with my printer. It was starting to under extrude, but I kind of ignored it, and that made it difficult to get the bed level and for the initial layers to stick to, well, for any layers to stick to each other. Eventually I got tired of it and I took it apart, and so a whole bunch of material had squeezed out of the top of the block from where the tube meets the nozzle. And I had to heat it up, clean that off. It wasn't difficult to clean. And then I changed out the nozzle and I put back on another 6mm nozzle because it was clogged. I leveled the bed and got right back to printing. I designed a couple of simple objects for my chair in the garage. I made a couple of adapters for the table holder on the arm of the chair. The original hole was not the correct size to hold the articulated arm. For my microphone, I also redesigned my cup holder adapter that I was previously using so that it actually takes the place of the original one instead of fitting inside the original one. It's a little bit better. I also redesigned the table holder again and made a different one, and it allows for a 1/4-inch bolt for mounting many of my other peripherals that I use, including like phone mounts, the camera mount that's right in front of me, and just I even have an adapter for my microphone to fit on there, and just about anything I have that mounts to something can mount to 1/4-inch. Now, I also 3D printed some skull hairpins for some members of my family and decided that I liked it for my beard. But I needed to slightly redesign so that they were a bit smaller and easier to use on my beard. So I have printed a few of the original, and I redesigned one of those original ones so that it just did not have the top part of the skull, which came up to almost my lip when it was in my beard. And printed it out, and I'm actually wearing it now. If you're looking at the YouTube, and I think it works out pretty well and looks pretty good. Now, I also ended up getting a multicolored filament and printed out one of the full-size ones for Jackie, and she seems to like it well enough. There is an issue with where the support material meets the print that I'm going to have to work through because it is a little rough and it catches in her hair. So I'm going to reduce the distance between the two and see if I can get that to smooth out. It wasn't too much of a problem separating the two, so I'm hoping that there also won't be a problem with the narrower gap. Okay, I also got a care package from Moss. There were several cool items in there, including a first gen Echo device, one of the full size ones. Moss was having issues getting it to connect to his Wi-Fi. It took a little bit more manual work because it was a first generation, but I was able to get it up and running, and now it's set up in my kitchen for music listening while cooking. And
Can I ask a
honestly,
quick question?
go ahead.
Just going back to your 3D printed thing.
Hmm.
If someone wants to get into 3D printing, how's the best way to do it?
Buy an Ender 3. If
Okay.
you're looking for the cheapest way, then buy a used Ender 3.
Hmm.
Um, but they're low cost. I mean, yeah, there are cheaper ones out there, but the Ender 3 is upgradable, and it it prints really well, and it is a lot of things you can do to it to make it an even better printer than when you first get it, and that's
Hmm.
200 to 270 $80, somewhere in that range, depending. And
A
then
cheaper,
go
a
ahead.
cheaper or easier way to get into it in the UK is there are a number of makerspace groups out there, and you can just find out if there's a local makerspace group and use their equipment until you figure out what you want.
Well, I've just done a quick Google search and I've seen that there's a Creality Ender 3 3D printer for
That's the one.
£150.
No, that would be the V1, I suppose,
Mm.
which is a little bit older than the V2, and you do have to think about whether or not it's got the silent board already installed. But really, even the V1 will print just fine, especially if you hook it up to like a Raspberry Pi and use Octoprint or something to that effect. Um, oh, this is the one that I printed for Jackie, and you can kind of see that metallic sheen,
Mm.
and then you can see the roughness on the inside, which catches on her hair, and you can see the difference between mine and this one, and the slight redesign that I had to do so that it fits my beard better instead of
Yeah, there's a V2 here as well
the
for
V2 is
cutting
what
silent.
I'm using right now. I used to use the Monoprice Maker Select V2, but now I'm using the Ender Pro 3 V2, or the Ender 3 V2, not the Pro V2.
Mhm. Something I'm thinking of getting into, although I need to find a reason first. First, I need to make up a reason, then I'll buy it.
Well, I 3D print a lot of things. I mean, headphone holders, the stand for my mic, those adapters that I was talking about, which are simple enough designs, vices, uh, toys for Christmas. I have certain people that are really into the Mandalorian, so I'll print those, and
Mhm.
cheap gift for Christmas. And it goes over really well. Decorations for Halloween, you name it. Go on Thingiverse, find things.
The pandemic, my first pandemic Christmas ornament that
Oh
everybody
yeah,
had
the
one.
first pandemic Christmas ornament and just things like that. Okay. Um, so also I did during the show here. I wanted to really show off that multicolor filament, so I printed this cup that will hold my monster cans, and I think it just turned out, other than some spacing issues at the bottom, I think it turned out exceptionally well, and I really like the coloring that came up in the multicolor for this monster cup holder. Okay, and moving on, there was also the large size Echo. I really do like the sound quality on that a lot more than the Dots, which is why it's set up for music in my kitchen. It's a good space for it, and I can just listen while I'm cooking. There was also one of the trackball mice that Moss and myself like, one of the M570s from Logitech. Moss was having some stability issues with the device, and I'm still testing. I haven't seen that yet, and I have not been able to reproduce that issue. It is
My wife
literally
was swearing at it a lot, and then I tried
right
it myself
here.
and swore at it a bit myself. So We just bought newer mice.
Yeah.
Trackballs actually.
Yeah, but like I said, I have not seen any problem with it yet. And if I do, that will give me something to work on. Now, he also sent me one of his XLR to USB systems. Which what was it called?
EBXYA.
The EBXYA. The one he was using the other week when it was disconnecting and reconnecting and causing some problems. Now, I had it hooked up. I even got on a call with Moss using this, and I was not able to reproduce the issue. It did give me a chance to test out some very old microphones that I had sitting around for a very long time and had never used. The MC300 has some connector issues of its own. It might actually be the 20-year-old cable that is with it. And I'd like a different cable to test out with it, but I was not able to get another XLR cable, and not on in a short time frame. I went and looked at some of the resales around here, and nobody had a XLR mic or the cable for sale. Now, I can't find any major issues, so I will be sending it back to Moss. I know that he is using the XLR cable on the new device, so I assume that that's working just fine. I know he did not send the USB cable that he was using, but he is using those cables currently on his new XLR device. So I have no idea what the problem was. And I jiggled that thing every which direction trying to see if I could get a disconnect or anything like that, and it's fine. The only issues that I ever had was on the microphone side. If I turned the angle wrong, then it would disconnect and reconnect, but that was completely independent of anything going on with the XLR box itself.
You tried wiggling the USB port because
Yes, I did.
that's where I was having the trouble.
That was the first thing I checked, and there's two USB connections there. There's a USB 3 for power, as long as it's 5 volt, and then there's the USB 2 full size. And both of those are extremely solid. And I wiggled them while it was hooked up to see if it would connect or disconnect while watching my various audio connections, and it stayed completely stable. So, and I also did the same thing while monitoring the microphone on Audacity, and it stayed just fine. So I can't find anything. Maybe it gets back to Moss and it starts doing it again, but for now,
Well, in which case, I'll talk more about that in my
in your
Bible,
wandering.
so, yeah.
Now, moving on from that, I've also been back on the campaign trail, but not for myself this time. I've been helping another individual with his campaign for school board here in Allen. I worked at the polls all day yesterday, other than a couple of hours when I went to the gym. I had a lot of fun shaking hands and talking to people without the pressure of being the one that is running. I will also be helping out next weekend on Saturday, so I'm going to end up missing the off-week show. But that will be the last one for the year, because then voting will be done. And I got to tell you, it's been a nasty campaign this year.
National elections.
Oh, yeah.
That comes around in November.
National elections, but I might have to do some block walking for that, but it probably won't be on a Saturday or Sunday. Now, recently, when I say recently, I mean on Friday, I'd been offered a lateral transfer at work. Well, at first, it wouldn't be a team lead role, which is what I have currently. I would be getting training at first, because it would be an all new thing for me. And then I would eventually, hopefully, build a new team if things went well at this location here in the DFW area. But there's a lot of chances for things like that to go wrong that way. And I'm pretty sure that I would get the chance to go through the HR process again and renegotiate for a reasonable raise, which is kind of what I need right now. Now, I do enjoy the things that I'm doing now, but I also like to, grow and do new things. And I've been doing this for like 7 years. Things are changing in my current role, and there are, new things there and things to learn, but the raise might be worth it. And there's always a chance when you start a position like this that other people in other locations realize what's going on and you get stonewalled. I've seen that happen to a lot of people trying to get a new team started up here. where they just get completely cut out because everybody else is worried about losing their jobs. And it is a valid fear. But mostly, unless they're completely planning on closing out like a support division or an entire location, the company that I'm with really tries to find another position for anyone that, their position closes out. But it's still a rough time right now in the market to be trying to find a job or anything like that. And that's what I've been up to the last couple of weeks. If anybody's hiring, you know what, just let me know. I'd prefer a remote position anyway. All right, Moss.
Okay. Well, I got my new i5 M700 Tiny up and running just fine. I also got a new or perhaps repackaged EBXYA box. And although it works, it was missing a knob and has a short in the headphone jack. I'm not good at soldering, so I do want to say this is a pretty good box with a great price and low quality control. As Joe said, I sent my old first generation Amazon Echo to him to play with, as well as an M570 trackball, which had gotten flaky, and my old EBXYA sound box for troubleshooting and fixing. Yes, he hasn't found anything wrong with it. I wonder what was wrong with it. The sound box is the only thing he has to return to me. I might need to send him a new sound box. The headphone jack is not working, but I can plug my headphones into the computer. It makes for fun setup. When I set up my sound system to go online like this, I have to make sure that I've got the output on the computer and not on the microphone or the sound box. Anyhow, when he gets the EBXYA box back to me, I might send him the new one to check that headphone jack. The fact that the new box came without a knob on it sort of made me feel like it might have been a returned unit. I'm still cranking out Full Circle Weekly News each week, and we just got Distro Hopper's Digest recorded with a new co-host on Tuesday. Dale, of course, is on that show with me. Much appreciated. I'm starting to get my practice licks for my next concert, which is the second weekend of June, the actual time and date to be determined. I tried to apply to perform at another convention at the end of May, but I was probably a month or three too late. I have not heard back from them, although it's been a couple of weeks. I would have thought that they could have gotten back to me, at least to say, no, you're too late. I did get a nice little gadget from Temu. This little thing here basically is a practice thing. It's not really a guitar, but it's a guitar neck, so I can, without having to warm myself up or get my energy up to actually play some music, I can just sit here and finger this thing and keep my calluses up, which is an important thing because I don't very often actually touch my guitar. A personal defect in my personality. I usually only touch it when there's somebody to actually play for. And so this gives me something to fiddle with to keep my calluses up so my fingers don't hurt when I do start playing for somebody.
I thought this was a family-friendly show.
What did I say, Joe?
Gotcha.
You were talking. You were talking about fingering and only doing it when you have somebody to do it for.
Yeah, on a guitar. I was very clear. It was on a guitar, and
I know. I'm just a horrible human being.
You're a horrible human being.
I was there too.
I am family friendly. You guys aren't. All right. Well, that's it for me. I'll leave you perverts alone.
I do want to mention that things like that, the knob. If you're really good at like 3D design, then like 3D designing and printing a new knob is a great use for 3D printer to
print me a new knob. You've got
I'm not going to design one.
I think,
but it's still a good thing.
I think getting a unit brand new with no knob on it and then coming on the show and saying that it's a good device is being awfully generous.
For the price, you really
Well,
can't.
you get what
It's
you pay
another.
for.
It's
He
another
put
$20
in-
to get something that isn't even as well designed as this. This is very brilliantly engineered and designed. It's just poor quality control.
Yeah, he put
Yeah.
in his two caveats. He said for the price and poor quality control. So
I mean,
And you
even
can
if
go
I,
on Amazon and read the reviews, and the reviews on it are 4.2 stars overall, and there are tons of 4 and 5-star reviews. And if you read them, almost every single person had a problem with the original device they were sent, but the company sent them a new one, and they usually didn't even require them to send the old one back.
that tells me that they got 2 stacks of them.
And in fact,
They send you out of that
me.
first stack.
They pressured me to give them a 4 or 5-star review before they would send me a replacement unit, and I said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that."
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
bump up the review after they sent you a new unit?
I did, but because of the unprofessionality of their customer support, I could not give it 5 stars.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I might have.
that is a silly thing.
It's a 5-star unit with 2-star customer support and 2-star quality control.
Also, Moss, I've done a quick search on AntennaPod for Full Circle Weekly News, and I'm still coming up with nothing.
Well, that's odd because I get it on my antenna pod. No, I have Podcast Addict.
Send them a link to the RSS.
Yeah, the link. It's on the website.
Am I spelling it in American English, and is that the problem?
I can't think of the letter
Is
you're
circle
missing.
spelled with a K over there or something?
No, it's all American spelling. Full Circle Weekly News. And they did change it because they had a redesigned website, and they added a whole letter to the URL. It now is /podcasts plural.
Well, they have not changed the RSS apparently on iTunes or podcastindex.org. So you might want to let somebody know because it's not showing. It's not showing up under
Well,
any of
people
those.
are getting it, and again, if you don't get it, I'd be happy to send you my copy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a technical person can work out how to go and find the RSS feed, but most people are just going to open up their podcast player and do a search for it, and if they don't find it, they're just going to move
But
on.
Bill,
The website
Bill,
only has downloaded and Spotify links.
you're missing something here. All the people that will be looking for it are technical people.
No, that's true, but I might think to myself, oh well, they must not be making episodes anymore, or they lost their hosting or something, and
I'm doing it every week.
Because
Every single
I have
week.
not
Unlike
heard-
my predecessor, who is also a former mintCast co-host, I have done it every week for over 2 years.
You only got a little behind.
Yeah, he was doing 4 or 5 weeks at a time.
releasing 4 or 5 weeks at a time.
Yes, just as one podcast and not even using Eric's feed.
Yeah,
So
you can't
yeah.
do that.
Well,
I use Eric's feeds because if I abbreviate the article, you can still go to the magazine and read the whole news the way it was.
Yeah, because
printed
that show right there. In case anybody needs a new Linux, it's unadulterated, pure Linux news. I mean, he just reads it to you as it is, and then moves on to the next thing. There's no contention or opinion.
Oh, but there was something about getting 6 or 7 weeks all at one time on your podcast.
Absolutely zero value in that.
As read by a former mintCast host.
Well,
Yeah.
Leo did not like doing it that way, and finally,
Oh, we weren't mentioning names there.
finally, he just told me to do it, or asked me to do it, or referred me to Ronnie's and got me approved to do it. But I've been doing it over 2 years now. Woohoo!
Well
Let's
done,
have me
you.
Stop talking. It's Bill's turn.
Well, I guess I got to speak now. All right. Well, these last 2 weeks have seen me out to Pennsylvania and back twice, to Missouri and back twice, and to Mississippi and back 3 times. I've only got a couple of things to talk about. Well, a couple of rather big things. Nearly a month ago, during the recording of Linux OTC, Leo turned me on to a project called QuickMU. a solution for quickly spinning up virtual machines, uh, leveraging the QEMU and the KVM technologies. I had heard of the project before on other podcasts, as it's a work by the prolific Martin Wimpress, among others. What Quick EMU does is take the guesswork and the ISO hunting out of installing and maintaining virtual machines. With essentially two commands, you can have a virtual machine of any making and origin spun up and running. I was interested in the project mostly because I've been largely unsuccessful in trying to spin up VMs for architectures other than x86, such as Mac OS um, and ARM. What I needed was a straightforward method of getting a Mac OS VM up and running. QuickEMU served that purpose to a brilliant standard. So basically, one command retrieves the necessary ISO, creates the VM, and creates the virtual file system, as well as the necessary configs. The second command actually spins up the machine. In the case of macOS, you have some additional steps to perform after the machine is set up and running in order to get a usable desktop up and running. But the GitHub page for the project clearly outlines the steps necessary to get each type of machine up and running, as well as caveat the possible pitfalls you may run into. I found the instructions intuitive and useful. In less than a half an hour, I had a macOS desktop up and running, signed in with my Apple ID, and installing software as though I was using a Mac machine. Kudos to the QuickEMU project. I needed a shower after doing all that, but I got it done. One of the necessary pieces of software used to make all of the shows. Oh, great. Thanks, Moss. One of the necessary pieces of software used to make all of the shows I'm a part of is OBS Studio, which, as many would be aware, is one of those darling open source projects that provides the necessary tools to create video production for digital content creators. While I've been using OBS for some time for the production of all the shows I'm a part of, I've only recently decided to make use of the ability of the software to take advantage of hardware acceleration. For those who, like me, have AMD graphics, you basically have one straightforward option, and that's the VA API, or the Video Acceleration API, which basically takes advantage of an FFmpeg API to provide general purpose hardware acceleration. Up till now, my production machine consisted of two video cards, one being the integrated graphics SoC, or built-in card, that came with the machine, and an additional AMD R5 430 2GB GDDR5 card I purchased on eBay to give me multi-monitor capability. While this solution worked, it always felt a bit sloppy, given two of the monitors are connected to the discrete card and one to the SoC. I never felt like the performance was quite good enough, so off to Amazon I went. While searching for a single card solution for my graphics challenge, I basically landed on two possible solutions. I narrowed my choices down to either the AMD Fire Pro W5100 4GB or the NVIDIA Quadro M2000 4GB. The thing that attracted me to the NVIDIA solution was the option to make use of the NVENC technology bespoke to NVIDIA hardware. Although this is a great option, it is in fact proprietary in terms of its code base and therefore evil. None of that diminished my curiosity, though. I couldn't decide what would be the best, what would be the most performant option, given the benchmarks for both devices seemed to be very similar. So I purchased both. Although the cards came...
A very Bill solution.
Yeah, well, yeah. I have nothing to say for myself. Um, Given the cards came from different locations, they arrived at my house the same day, so I was able to take a little time testing both cards, which that testing actually carried on until right before. And incidentally, during the beginning of this show, I was dealing with problems. Um, so although the cards came down, okay, blah blah blah. Currently, I'm using the Nvidia card. Okay, that's no longer true, but that's mostly because it was the second of the two cards I tried. I have to say, overall, I'm happy with the performance of both cards. The NVIDIA card did have the additional step of enabling the binary firmware and the hardware manager, um, but that really wasn't a huge deal. I only record the stream in 1080p, so the performance was very similar on the two cards. Uh, the goal here was to offload graphics processing while providing a solution where all three monitors were connected to the same GPU. Both cards are fit for that purpose. Both cards have 4 outputs on them, and I'm going to continue to tinker and test with these, and I have throughout the weekend. I actually wrote this much of this before I did most of the testing, and well, I've come up with a lot, but I am curious as to whether or not there's any advantage to NVIDIA's proprietary encoding over the open source VAPI option. So that will be the thing I focus on. If I find there is no real benefit, my permanent choice may come down to the decision of ethics. One thing of note is that installation of the NVIDIA card was not terrible, but not great. When I first installed the new card and subsequently started the machine, it booted and rendered the desktop just fine, but that's because it was using the Nuvo open source driver by default, which is fine, but I wanted to get the most out of this card I could in terms of performance. Opening the slick little driver manager that you've got on Linux Mint 21.1 offers the option to stay on the open source driver or switch to the proprietary NVIDIA binary driver. I was presented with 6 options for this driver, ranging in version numbers 390 to 530, 530 being the quote recommended option. So I chose that one. After installing the necessary packages, it prompted for a reboot, which I did, and now the anguish. I thought everything would be fine because I was presented with the Linux Mint Grub splash screen, but upon exiting from that screen, I was presented with a with no login screen or desktop. I had nothing. I thought to myself, okay, that's it. I'm back to AMD. But after plugging a monitor into one of the built-in HDMI ports that connect to the SoC card, I had a working desktop. And from there, I went back to the driver manager and switched the NVIDIA driver one version down from the newest. Rebooted, and now it worked. After looking closer at the list of NVIDIA binary drivers, I noticed that the newest version was built for Ubuntu 22.04.1, the newest being built against 22.04.2. So I assume what might be the case is that 21.1 is based on, or Mint 21.1 is based on Ubuntu 22.04.1. I imagine some Googling would go a long way to answer that question, but I was just glad to get it working. Again, if there's no noticeable difference in performance, I may likely go with the AMD card as long as it relieves the problem of dependence on drivers that may not work with your kernel version. At present, however, I am enjoying a world of performance improvements over the cheap 2-port card that I had running before. Okay, so like I said, I wrote most of that before the show today, and incidentally, I'm actually using the AMD Fire Pro card because what ended up happening after that, I had it running with the one version number down. binary driver, and then I tried to spin up a couple of Steam games, and I wasn't trying to use like super high 4K resolution with 120 frames a second or anything like that, but it just completely froze the graphics from end to end. I wasn't even able to do a Control Alt F1 and get to a terminal to restart the machine or anything. It was just completely borked, and so I shut it down the hard way, which makes me cringe to just hold down the power button until it dies. But that's what I did and started back up, and I went one version lower on the driver, and then the games worked. But that made me a little bit dubious over whether or not I want to use that card at all. So I put the AMD card in it, and I thought all was well because you're not even presented with any proprietary options with an AMD card. It just works. But then when I set up OBS and got started with the episode today, as many that are listening right now would be aware, um, I switched it over now to use the AMD's video acceleration API on OBS. You have to go into advanced settings and enable that and set everything by hand. And what I found was it was not streaming above about 3,000 kilobytes a second, which was making the video freeze on the YouTube channel. So I had to stop the recording or stop the streaming. I didn't even say anything to these guys. I just did it. I had to stop the streaming and set up another feed and then put it back on software rendering. So the struggle continues. This may end up being a case where streaming to YouTube on Linux is just a software issue and not a hardware issue because it just seemed like there was I don't know what's going on, if there was a bit rate cap with VA API or if it's an OBS issue because it is the flat pack version of OBS. So who knows if it may not have all the right access to the hardware or what. But I don't think I had that problem with the Nvidia card. So I don't know. That's going to be something I'm going to keep fiddling with probably for the next couple weeks. So anyway, that's my struggle. How about you, Majid?
So, um, a couple of months ago, I made the premature decision that I didn't need a desktop computer. I rarely used it. My son kept on nicking the monitor that I had so that he could use it with his PS4, and it was still running Windows. And because I rarely used it, as I said, I hadn't even I hadn't even bothered putting Linux on it. So, because I thought, well, I can do all my computing on the laptops and the tablets and all the other things that I have, you know. And then obviously I then came onto mintCast and then realized very quickly that, um, yeah, I think I still need a desktop computer, especially with all the audio issues that occurred last episode. And I hope don't happen this time, but I don't know. Anyway, um, so I decided, yeah, I needed to have a desktop PC. Uh, I use mainly as a podcasting rig, but in general for anything else as well. Um, so just looking out on the internet, it seems that there's a lot of enterprise style computers which are now must be out of support, and are so ending up on the uh, the used market, eBay and things like that. So I was able to find what I thought was a reasonable deal. It was a HP ProDesk mini PC for about £250, which is 315 US dollars. And as I said, it was reasonably beefy for me anyway. i7, 8th gen, but i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 SSD. Came with Windows 10, but of course I wasn't going to use that. because this is mintcast, and since I was now going to be a hopefully regular member on mintcast, I thought since it's been a while since I've used mint, I thought, maybe this is the way to go. So I burned an ISO of 21.1 cinnamon edition. I boot into the live environment, and to be honest, it seemed a little bit plain, which is not a bad thing if you want to get stuff done. Um, I don't know, and maybe it could be because I've moved over to KD recently on some of my other boxes, and I liked the configurability. I don't know, but anyway, I thought I'll persevere. Went through the usual install process, which was really quick. Um, Probably only took about 15 minutes, which reminded me of the days when I did used to use Mint and put it on my machines and how quick it used to be to install then. Then anyway, then I went to boot and nothing. Just got a grub menu. Now at this point, I probably should have tried again. Um, but then I thought maybe this is a sign from the open source gods that I need to go back to KDE. So I thought, okay, fine, Kubuntu it is then. Um, I think, to be honest, it might be a kernel issue because Mint 21.1 is on 5.15, while the latest Kubuntu 23.04 is on 6.2. I'm not sure why that would matter on a machine that's about 4 years old, but that was my only assumption. Either that or I probably messed up during the install, which I suppose now that I think about it is probably more likely. Um, so, anywho, I got Kubuntu on it and did my first live stream last week from the box. I'm using it now for this thing. It detected all my hardware and all the other kind of um, recent keyboard, mouse, headphones, everything that I've been buying to go with the rig. Um, so I put Kubuntu on it, as I said, and I had it now both on my desktop and on my main Asus laptop. And I had a couple of light bulb moments, which I apologize if these are hashtag no shit Sherlock, but I mean, I realized that GNOME really only makes sense on a laptop, especially with the Wayland support. Touchpad
Or tablet.
gestures, swipes, um, and it it makes sense on that form factor. It doesn't make sense on this kind of form factor. Maybe this is one of the many reasons why people were against GNOME 3 when it first launched. KDE, whilst it's perfectly fine on a laptop, really comes onto its own on a desktop. I mean, as I said, for me, it's relatively new because I've not really used KDE before these last couple of months. I'm really enjoying how configurable it is. I'm really enjoying it, I've got to be honest. A random thing that I noticed was I mentioned in my last bi-weekly wanderings that I'd got this MacBook, which anyway, the only thing I seems to be using from that is the fact that it has a USB-C charger, an Apple USB-C charger, and so I was using that, to charge a couple of things. Had to connect it up to one of my Raspberry Pis and whatever. And for some reason, which I don't understand, whenever it's connected to the power outlet or the extension leads or whatever that this rig is attached to, the other things like my printer or my monitor don't work. I take the plug out and it works. I have absolutely no idea why that is. I don't know if it's because I think it's a 65-watt charger. Maybe it's drawing a bit too much power. I don't know. Find it weird. And I just thought, more annoyances from a fruit-based company, eh? Always typical. Um, I saw
Well,
a
it
couple of
sounds like a
YouTube videos
power
that were.
output problem more than
Sorry?
anything else. It sounds like a power output problem more than anything else on your one outlet. Maybe some kind of safety system. I don't know how you guys' power work there.
I mean,
We'd have blown a fuse or something.
I moved everything around. I started putting things into different ones, and the only thing that I noticed was when I unplugged the Apple one from the system, everything's worked.
Well, it's a very high power device,
Mm,
the power brick.
mm,
So I don't know. Maybe.
mm. Just not something I'd ever come across before. But I saw some of the YouTube videos that have been around over the last week or two by Linus Tech Tips and Chris Titus Tech on the subject of Atlas OS, which seems to be inverted commas lighter version of Windows. Basically, it seems to be the most hackable and dangerous version of Windows you can have because it strips out any of the kind of security features exist as it is. So just seems like to be a way to getting pwned or hacked. So I think I'll stick with Linux. Um, outside of the computing world, it was a Muslim festival of Eid at the end of Ramadan. So we had lots and lots of food. I had lots of biryani, had lots of kebabs, met some friends. It was nice family time. Kids got some presents. We do it very much like Christmas, give the kids presents and all that sort of thing, which was so that was nice. Um, at work, we've had a change of leadership in the hospital, and this new guy is very proactive, and he's done like a workforce review and found that we are 15% understaffed, and yet we're providing about 120% of the service we were doing before COVID. Um, which, on the one hand, is well done to the people for doing that, and number two, no wonder everybody's feeling burnt out and stressed, and number three, how shambolic were the management before if they've just presided over this? Um, As I'm the educational lead at the hospital, I do the assessments for some of the residents and junior medical staff, and I actually got to use one of the simulation mans. So basically, it's a model, but it's quite a high fidelity model. You can make it move slightly, you can make it talk, make it blink. So you can change all the parameters, the heart rate, the blood pressure, and all this kind of stuff. And we use it to simulate critical scenarios and clinical scenarios, which would be too dangerous to kind of simulate in real life. You don't really want to be testing people out on real, almost dead people. Um, it was pretty good actually. I was impressed, and the interesting thing is that you walk in and you think to yourself, well, this is clearly a mannequin, and this is clearly all fake. But once you're into the scenario, people do behave as they do, kind of like in real life, and I thought that was really interesting. I also got a letter from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and I found out that even though I have a dormant limited company, I apparently owe some tax. I'm not entirely sure how you can owe tax when you have zero revenue, but hey, that's taxes for you. So I'm still trying to figure that out.
Because they
Anyway,
don't want you using your LLC as a tax haven.
okay, probably. I don't know. Um, I thought that's the whole point of a limited company to use it to avoid tax. It's the whole reason it exists, isn't it? Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I haven't even got any revenue from it, so it's not like I don't know. Anyway, um, I better move on to Dale.
Well, the past 4 weeks I've driven from Ohio to California, California to Oklahoma, back to California. From there, I went to Tennessee. In Tennessee, I had two deliveries, with one in Kentucky. I went back to Tennessee, and that delivered to Arizona. From Arizona back to Tennessee. Finally, I drove from Tennessee to Ohio, and there was delays in there too. Like, I spent the weekend at our terminal before I drove back to Ohio, just waiting for freight to come and go.
Now, I have to ask. I'm going to stop you right there before you continue on. That's a lot of driving. That's a lot of hours on the road. Do you normally just listen to podcasts, or do you do audiobooks as well?
Actually, what I was just doing a few minutes ago while one of you were talking, I actually forgot about adding Linux OTC to my podcast reader because I would hear about it and I'd be doing something that I'd forget to add it and then forget about it. But um, I'm actually considering the audiobooks too because sometimes I run out of podcasts to listen to, and I try to go through the back catalog of ones that I subscribe that I haven't, because I've been doing that with Linux Cast and DLN what used to be called DLN Extend.
Linux Out Loud.
Linux Out Loud now. Yeah, I've been going through their back catalog. So, but yeah, I listen to about 40. Let's see here. Podcast Addict, Show All. Right now, I'm listening or subscribing to 39. And I think some of them are on hiatus or dormant that I probably need to unsubscribe from.
Well,
But
if you want, talk to me later, and we'll get you set up on my server, and you can browse my audiobook library.
cool.
Which
Yeah,
is substantial.
Yeah, I'll have to. I've actually considered that for many years because most of those, I think probably 16 or so of those are Linux technology related. So it might be a nice departure from that. So let's see. But yeah, another thing about the drive, there, like I said, there are some delays in there that you can't really help about. Like we do a lot of stuff that comes out of excuse me, that comes out of Mexico, so there is some importation delays and other issues like that. And also, Bill can even attest to this, that we always joke about the government running at the speed of government. Well, freight runs at the speed of freight. When you're waiting for it, it takes forever. And when they want it delivered, it doesn't feel like it takes forever. Like, yeah, it does seem like a long time to go from Ohio to Southern California. But the way I look at it, and people, it's like 4 weeks is such a long time. I don't really think about it because, like, I leave Tuesday, and sometimes I don't leave until Wednesday. It all depends on what they arrange. For me, it's like, okay, it'll take 3 days to get to California, approximately, and some change. And I usually, excuse me, drive like 9.5 hours a day, and we have a required 30-minute break minimum. A lot of these things are minimums and maximums in our industry. So I don't even think about it because I drive, like, it all depends on how late it gets. Like, and they don't push us that hard. Like, they'll give me 4 days to do a 3-day trip or 4.5 days to do a 3-day trip. So it's not like I had in the past. So that's why it doesn't seem like it goes by. So, like, because, like, to give an example, 3 days to Southern California. Okay, what's this say? That's Wednesday. Well, that's Friday now. Well, what's this say? I get a load to Tennessee, which is basically the same distance of, California. Well, that's another 3 days. And if I had to wait a day for it to cross over from Mexico, that's an extra day. So right there, you've got a week. And all I've done was cross the country twice. So that's why, to me, doesn't really think that.
It sounds alien to normal people
Yes.
because they think of each day in terms of that day and all the things they did in that day. And then for me, like, sometimes my work day will start Monday morning and end Friday night, because
Yeah.
what you were describing right there is we get going on a trip, especially cross country, where you're dealing with thousands of miles, and the time just runs together. Um, you've got this opposite interpretation of time that normal people do, where we feel like we don't have enough time, and normal people are feeling like time ain't going by fast enough, so it feels to us like time is just slipping away. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
when you're on the road, that 3 weeks will just go by like it's nothing.
Yeah, it's like I'm not going to be home for. I'll be home for 2 days in May, and there's 30 days in May, I think. So I will be home for 3 days out of the entire month when I come home next month. So it does make it fly by. I mean, 20 years of this, and yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this is pretty much like me for like 10 hours a day. Like, this is the steering wheel, and I'm like,
Only 10, Dale? Only 10?
The amount of multitasking I would have to do to keep driving interesting enough would probably get me and many other people killed.
You would be amazed. You could sit there and watch YouTube with your phone right up there on the dashboard. They don't even bother hiding it nowadays. And the cops go right on by. They don't even care anymore.
I saw a
That's
FedEx
good.
truck that had a laptop sitting
Yeah.
on the dash in full view,
The number
watching a
of
DVD.
gadgets these guys will have, and they don't even. Most of these like fleet trucks, these guys, the younger guys, they'll have at least 3 GPS devices on the dashboard and
Hmm.
mounted on the windshield, and then they've got their phone up there too, and then that might have either Google Maps or YouTube playing on
Didn't
it,
that
or
used to be illegal?
it sure did, but they just don't
It
care.
still is, but they don't care.
It's a
Okay.
$2,800 fine,
Yeah.
not by
For
the state.
driving
F-
distracted.
It's a
Yeah.
federal law. It goes above, like usually the states are allowed to manage their own laws and stuff, but when it comes into interstate commerce,
We have very
they
little rights.
they can't really have a say in it.
The problem comes though in the enforcement, because if somebody was to take, like, if you took me to court with a fine like that, and then there's also a fine for the company as a side component, which is a lot higher than what the driver would pay. But to take that to court, it's very difficult to prove that this driver, unless he admits to it or whatever, it's very hard to prove that they were on their device at that moment without being able to get subpoenas for the phone's records or whatever. So
Yeah, and some of the states, the way they have it worded, they shoot themselves in the foot about it because, like, some of them, like, I think, oh, I can't remember, Texas or Arizona, one of them, they say you cannot have an electronic device in your hand. Okay, well, some drivers, I don't do this, but some drivers have it on the dash. I mean, mine sits in the cup holder, and I don't even pay attention to it because I hardly ever get any phone calls. But I've seen him do that, and yeah, it's proof. I mean, and it's also the thing of
Well,
I
I
was
had.
like using a calculator. Was that distracted driving? You know,
I have a dash mount for my phone, obviously. But you're allowed in Texas to have a GPS device. So I guess the easy thing to do would be, while you're driving down the road, I guess if you wanted to watch a YouTube video or something. And no, I don't do that. But if you wanted to, I guess that would be perfectly fine. And then if you get pulled over, you just quickly switch over to your GPS app.
yeah.
So yeah, I see how you can get away with it.
I would like to also state that until we find out when Dale is going to be home, we can't schedule the date of the next recording of Distro Hopper's Digest. But
I
let's
sense
move
tension
on.
in your voice.
Oh, there is no tension. We have
You
we
should
do
set up
fine.
should set up your rig so that you can record in the evening while you're out on the road. That would make a
You
good
would be
show.
amazed how difficult that is,
Yeah.
because the state
This is
of
something that I would like to hear about.
yeah.
How difficult that is.
I've been trying to put together a workable episode. Maybe Dale, we can have you back on to talk about that in the future, because
Sure.
it is a real terrible experience trying to get getting good enough internet to download the raw files so that I can do the show editing is basically what I've resorted to, is just tethering off the phone. But there's limitations involved in that.
You don't like truck stop Wi-Fi?
Oh my God. You could connect to it. I wouldn't want to rely on it. Now, what I haven't tried is like the premium services, because you can pay a little money, or you can use your fuel points, because the places we go, they give you a card and you can accumulate points based on how much fuel you buy, which is almost $1,000 a day or over. So
Oh.
Yeah, I've tried Interstate Zone, which is
So-
by TA. I paid for that just to try it once, and I tried Loves once.
Lubs isn't bad, but you got to get near the device.
You got to
But
get near the shop or the building.
yeah, and so it's yeah, we could talk all day about the woes of tech people in the road, but the
As we
problem.
have already.
Look, I know it's my fault, but we are going a little bit long.
Yeah,
so.
we're
So, well, anyways, I'll just run through this real quick here. I participated in Linux Saloon's 1 week distro exploration. That was a few weeks ago, or could even been a month ago. I don't remember. Which was Archcraft, a Arch-based distro using the OpenBox window manager. It was a nice minimalist distro, and I enjoyed using it. I used OpenBox when I first got into Linux in the mid 90s. With that renewed interest, I decided to install Debian Stable on my Dell Inspiron 13 and installed OpenBox. When you install a window manager from the repositories, they are usually very minimally configured or a generic configuration, which basically means no configuration in some cases. I used Git to download and compile PyCom, which is a fork of Compton. It's a compositor. It's responsible for the effects you see on your screen, like translucency and rounding corners and stuff like that, visual effects, like the wobbly windows you see in a KD Plasma is a compositing effect. And because we all know about Debian and some of their age of their packages, I wanted to make sure I had the most current one. So let's see. After I used it for a few weeks, and I just configured it in my free time, and that because I still had my other distro to keep up on for distro hoppers, and I also don't do it every day. I do either watch YouTube on my tablet, or I also have a 24-inch TV with a Roku in the truck too that I can watch. It all depends on if I want to use it. Let's see. I was just about decided on Debian when a friend he switched to Void from I think Slackware or from FreeBSD. I can't remember what he was running at the time. I think it was Slackware, and had been telling me about it because he knew that I had previously reviewed it a few years ago for distro hoppers. It was one of my favorite distros that I've reviewed for the podcast. So I decided to give it another go. So in preparation for when I arrive home this week here, or last week, I watched many YouTube videos, and they were mostly consisting of configuring PyCom and Polybar, which is a panel that you have in your desktop, and some other videos based on Void. They do have I'll talk a little bit about Void. They do have a mostly ready XFCE ISO available. It requires some package installation decisions before you can have 100% usable installation. And it's just little niggly things, like when you go into XFCE, you have sound, you just have no way of controlling the volume. So you actually have to install the Pavel control for pulse audio and stuff like that, only because they don't make that decision for you because there's other ways of doing it. You have some people that are completely hardcore terminal users, and they'll go into the terminal and do that. So I can see why they don't make those decisions. So instead of using that easier solution, finger quotes, I used the base install. And the base install is basically like Arch. You get a terminal prompt and you have to install everything yourself. nothing's there except for what's needed for the operating system. So basically, to make a long story short here, I admitted defeat today, or yesterday actually evening, because I couldn't get some things to work, and it was just basically trying to find the dependency and trying to find how this works. And we're both working together, learning Void together here. And he told me that yeah, he admitted defeat too, and ended up just going back and installing the XFC edition, which has a working desktop, has everything functioning, and the only thing we have to do is just install what we want and disable what we don't want. So that's why I'm doing everything on my System 76 Pangolin, because this thing is still not completely usable yet.
You want me to get you into contact with Toyum so you can yell at him? Tell him to fix things?
We're not at that level yet. This level of detail is not for everyone, but I do enjoy it to a degree. I pretty much lost the enjoyment after spending 3 or 4 days, and I barely have a working desktop experience. So the funny thing is when you have something that doesn't work, you know you missed something, and you have to go and figure out what it was and install it. So my other activities include ordering a 4-port Intel gigabit Ethernet card from eBay. I'm going to use that in my future PF Sense build. It's going to be using a ASRock J34 55B ITX motherboard combo. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use that one in there or if I'm just going to buy a second one for my Plex server, which is going to be installed with TrueNAS Scale eventually. And then my other last thing I have on my list here is this right here. It's still in the box, but it is a Unify Light PoE 8-port. What is the full title of it here? I drove up to Micro Center to buy it. It's a Ubiquiti Unify Light 8 PoE switch model USW-Light-8-PoE. It's a gigabit layer 2 power over Ethernet switch. Supports 802.AT PoE Plus protocol. Has 4 powered, 4 unpowered ports. And I'm going to take the 5-port flex, they call it. It's a 5-port. I'm just going to put it on my desk and use it for something. So, and it will be powered by PoE, which is how it's being powered now, because I have another 60 watt of their old version of the 5-port or the 8-port switch on that computer desk. So that'll be future fun.
Sounds really interesting. All right, let's move on to the Linux innards. Really, really late. Okay, Dale, over to you again.
All right, well, one of my interests and hobbies is I've started recently is writing, because I never really was a really good writer in school. Even though I learned how to type in 5th grade, I was probably about. I know only us Americans refer to the grades we were in school, because I know in other countries they more specifically say the ages, but I don't remember any of that. So, but yeah, I learned how to type when I was in 5th grade, and mostly because I broke my arm and didn't learn how to write cursive properly. So, with meeting Moss a few years ago and being invited on the distro hoppers because they found out that I was an old distro hopper myself, Started writing the show notes and stuff. And then I've always been interested in history and certain tangents of history. And I did started doing these technology articles. And the one that I started here is I was wondering, I was talking with my friend Josh, and could have been my friend Don, I can't remember who, but I was thinking, or it could have even been Moss. And I was thinking, I wonder how old this whole idea is, because we all know, not all of us, but most of us know that a lot of this goes back to Xerox Park, and in the 70s. And they created all this technology, what we see, the desktop that we see today, and the whole idea how Steve Jobs got the ideas from that to create the uh, the interface on the Macs, and how Bill Gates also got the idea from Jobs of how to make Windows, and so on and so forth. So that's just the backstory about where this idea came from when the mintCast crew was asking for ideas for topics, and I said, well, I got these articles about, and I called them the origin of the graphical user interface. And I was thinking it was only going to be like one page, really simple. No, no, this has been a couple years in the making in my free time. And this be a quick question. I mean, I've already mentioned this in our planning meeting, a couple, like, was it 2 weeks ago? And maybe I think yesterday. But how old would you say the idea of interfacing with a computer goes back to? You don't have to say like a specific year, but what decade do you think this whole idea started in?
I can read the notes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Before you read the notes, what was your preconceived notion of?
Well, when we had this conversation the other day, I said 1953, which was relatively close.
Oh yeah, you were the closest of anyone that I've ever talked to about this. So yeah, basically the origins date back to 1955 at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and they created a thing called the light pen. And it basically looks like a regular writing utensil, but it has a light sensor on the tip of the pen. It was a very clever design. Briefly, how it
Oh,
worked.
Modher wanted me to interrupt you from the YouTube and says he had a couple things to say here. I don't know what .initRD or Zero Zebra do, but they make jokes about your name randomly in Linux Mint Server. .initRD is a cool dude, though. I've had a sweet time in Linux Mint Server. I think it goes back to the 1980s, which is what he was saying about the time frame that he thought.
Yeah.
And then, can you read my comment? So, yes, I can read your comment. And yes, 1980s.
Yeah. That honestly, I would, just because I knew about Xerox and that, I was thinking it couldn't have been any earlier than the 70s, because the whole idea of having a desktop computer wasn't even possible until the 80s with the Mac, what became the Mac, and the other computers that were built after that point.
Well, yeah, the Apple SE2s, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the IBM computers, the 5150s, the 5100 series.
Compact.
Yeah, and the Compaq
No.
spun off of that, and they were
The
the first.
Commodore 64.
Yeah, the Commodore 64. And you had the Ataris, and Compaq was the first OEM of the IBM desktops. So the brief way of how this pen worked is pretty much it can see the pixels, and it knows that the screen is being updated at whatever the refresh rate is of the monitor, and it can see when the pixel lights up. Well, the other thing is the computer knows about these pixel grids too. And basically, the pen says, hey, I just saw grid 1430 light up. I'm here. Then the computer says, yeah, I got it. And it knows what it put on the screen there. It goes, yeah, you're pointing to this. So I'm going to, and there would be like a little button on the thing. You'd click, go, okay, that's where I am. So pretty interesting how they devised that. Now, the first wide adoption was on Sage. It's the semi-automatic ground environment, and this is heavily government funded for military use. And what Sage was basically an early radar system because Hedy Lamour and I can't remember the other gentleman's name. They actually were one of the people that improved upon it with the spread spectrum technology, where like
Dale,
Doppler.
you do realize that Hedy Lamarr is a woman.
Yeah.
Okay, you said Hedy Lamarr and the other gentleman.
Oh, I told you. Remember, I told you earlier that I
Actually,
don't.
that still tracks.
Okay, I understand. I
Yeah.
just wanted it clear that one of our original pioneers was a woman
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things I
and a
mentioned
famous actress besides.
yeah, I'll probably duplicate this or repeat myself here, but it's in also in the notes here. The term computer, before a computer was invented, was basically a woman that could do complex mathematical calculations. Because
There was a film about this, wasn't there?
yeah, women weren't allowed to be in active combat, but they could join the military. And what they did was they created all the firing solutions for the bomber pilots and the artillery personnel, because all these women did all the calculations for the rise and fall and air. A 20-knot wind is going to slow it down this much, give this much of an angle, and stuff like that. So we really have to give a lot of thanks to the women of the 1940s and
Yeah, I'm trying to
1950s.
remember the name of the film that had it. I think it won an Oscar, didn't it? A couple of years ago.
About the lady that did all the calculations for NASA.
Now there was another
Right.
one about for the military. I think they were mainly African American women. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm probably misremembering.
Yeah, yeah. The memories recall is hard, but pretty much what they used it for is they had 16-inch CRTs that were configured to be used with the light pens, and basically they could just touch, like this bomber needs to go to Frankfurt, so they could actually be able to tap and plot a route for that, and it would update and say they're here now. Then they could actually tap the little dot and it would tell them, oh, that's this plane. Tap, and it was the earliest form of air traffic control, which I thought was that's the reason why I included it here, because I thought that was the first use of a very crude GUI, GUI system. And the computer, I love this, because even back then, companies were terrible at naming something. Guess what the name of this computer was? It was called the AN/FSQ7. Rolls right off the tongue. And so if you ever complain about models we have now, yeah, it hasn't gotten any better. It was also the first computer to use magnetic core memory. And basically, that was a piece of iron with a wire wrapped around it, with one end plugged into one receptor and one plugged into another one. I read how that works, and don't ask me to repeat it. And how they figured it out. But to give you an idea of the computers, we're not talking about, like a tablet, or I'm not sure if you can see the corner of my desktop, or there's my server right there. There's my Plex server. We're not talking about something like this. We're talking about a computer that weighed 250 tons. I'm assuming it's American tons. It was an American article I was reading. And contained 49,000 vacuum tubes. They called them electronic tubes back then. 250 tons. Let that sink in for a minute. The truck I drive has a maximum weight of 80,000. So that's, puts into perspective.
80,000 pounds is 40 tons.
Yeah, 40 tons. Yeah, sorry. My brain's going 100 miles an hour right now. But yes, Moss. So that gives you an idea. So terminology and technology differences have changed a lot since the 1950s to 2023. A CPU and memory was in many cabinets that would fill one floor of a building. Additional cabinets were used for storage. Now, these were the size initially of like washing machines and refrigerators. I mean, some of them were like a good almost 2 meters tall, maybe a meter wide. Some of them were on casters that can be moved. Some of them needed like forklifts to be able to move them around. I remember there was a picture, if you Google it, the 5 megabyte drive, IBM drive being pulled out of a 1940s or 50s era airplane with a forklift. And this 5 megabyte hard drive was like a couple tons, just to give you an idea what we're working with here. Now, the graphics is kind of, I played this joke on the guys in one of the planning meetings last week about the graphics terminal, which was kind of funny because we think of graphics as what we're looking at right now. Graphics to them is what we would consider text mode when you're typing commands in the terminal or in DOS. That's what they called graphics mode, because before then, how you interfaced with a computer was you had a Xerox line printer called a teletype print out the output of what you were keying in dip switches and buttons on this console. So that's to give you, some more perspective. And these terminals, what we would look at and consider a computer, like a desktop computer, they were called graphical display units, graphical terminals. And it's GDU for short. So the GDU depended on the CPU to do all the processing work. It was later referred to as a dumb terminal. If everyone ever heard of like a WISE terminal or a VT100, VT320, those were all dumb terminals. They pretty much had enough smarts to put the stuff on the screen, take the input you typed in the keyboard and the mouse, and send it to the CPU. Of course, the mouse hasn't been invented yet, but just to give you an idea. A complete computer was comprised of several CPU storage cabinets and many GDUs, covering several floors of a building. Most of the floors were GDUs, all wired directly to these CPUs. Now keep in mind, this is all government research facilities, universities had access to these. This wasn't something you could just walk down to and say, knock, 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 can I play Tetris on this thing? No. You had to have a reason to be there and use them. The 60s saw business begin to use computers. Initially, this was in the financial sector for banks and financial institutions because they found out computers are wicked fast at math. So they found out that instead of reconciling a bank after a month or a week and hope it was correct, they could feed it into a computer and they had, much faster reconciliations of their tallies. So I think we'll break here for if anyone wants to comment or question.
Oh, dumb terminals are awesome. I mean, well, back in the day, and then also, a lot of your MUDs tended to use the same techniques that they used back then to do anything kind of graphical. So,
Well, what was your favorite? Was your favorite the green, Was it the gray
Oh, definitely the
or was it
green.
the orange?
I
Was your
preferred the green.
Amber.
It's much easier on the
Definitely the
eyes than the
amber.
amber. And I don't
y-
ever remember seeing the gray.
gray was, I think, Weiss, Moss might be able to help me there. WYSE. I I'm not sure if you knew that from one of your ex-wives. The Weiss terminal.
No, I was not married to anyone working for Wise.
Okay. Well, I figured the one that you mentioned worked for digital, and I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
they may have had some Weiss terminals.
I think the NBI and other word processing units tended to use the white on gray monitors.
Yeah, they weren't very common. Most common were the orange, which were usually like the VT220s and VT320 ones. I never saw very many orange VT100s or 102s. But I knew about these because when I first got into IT work, there were still companies using this stuff, and I had to know how to work on them. But in any case, moving on. Even though the Light Pen was a big success, the killer app, so to speak, was the Sketchpad. And I believe we agree. I think this is the one that we're going to play a 2-minute video after I'm done talking here. Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
Okay.
That,
Well,
get
let
that
me
set up, running, ready.
Yeah, let me run through this. Let me read ahead here to see a good stopping point. We can play it before I start talking about the RAN tablet.
All right, just let me know.
All right. Even though, okay, I already read that section. The Sketchpad was created by Ivan Sutherland in 1963. Considered to be the ancestor of both computer-aided design, which is called CAD, and other major breakthroughs in computer graphics. So if you're a CAD or a Visio user, you can thank him for it, or you can curse him for it, your preference. The first program to use complete graphical words. The first program to use a complete graphical user interface from its inception. Some of these were modified to use it. This one was made for this intent and purpose. Now, this computer actually has a better name. They used a Lincoln TX-2. It was an advanced transistor-based computer built in 1958 by MIT's Lincoln Laboratory. It was their Lincoln campus in Massachusetts. A lot of hardware came out of this facility with the cooperation of IBM and later DEC when that was formed into a company, Digital Electronics Corporation. Users would draw on the screen using a light pen, using geometric constraints, which was a major invention, allowed for precise drawing as opposed to freehand drawing. It would correct the lines to the exact length, angles could be maintained while drawing is modified, and not to get into the finite details and the geeky thing of geometric constraints. Basically, the headline on the Cliff Notes book basically would say you would have a line like straight line, and you want to make it into a triangle. You just click and drag it up. The line would not increase in length. It would just move to that point, and it would be completely isometric between the both sides. This was a breakthrough. This was something where the computer actually had to calculate the math to do this. And we're talking about a computer that ran at a few kilobits per second. Yeah, we have, 4 gigahertz, 4 billion calculations per second, and this thing is doing a few thousand. That's why I preface a lot of this to take into consideration, because the stuff they did with this equipment, you want to talk about a potato? This is a potato on steroids. So, Bill, you can go ahead and play this demonstration of the sketchpad.
This system from about 1968 called Grail for Graphical Input Language.
This list of processes takes us back to the topmost level, where we may start to edit the flow
No
diagram.
keyboard whatsoever.
First, we erase a flow arrow, then move the connector out of the way so that we may draw a box in its place.
Recognized he wanted a box and made one.
The
Now it's
printing box
recognizing
is
his
being
hand printing.
used as commentary only in this case. The box is slightly too
Wants
large.
to change the size of the window.
Size.
Here's where Macintosh window control came from, literally.
Then draw a flow from the connector to the box. Attach a decision element to the box and draw a flow from it to scan.
Notice that every command
Volume is
is
messed
not
up.
just iconic, but also analogic.
New area. And move
By
the
that I
box
mean
position.
that
Yeah,
just like
it's
the thing that you want.
mostly this visual, unfortunately,
Want to scrub some tabs, swap it out.
which is the reason why I wanted to play it.
Draw a box, you just draw a box, it recognizes you wants one, makes one the same size. Chop off a corner.
And label it subscan.
You want characters, you just make characters, and it recognizes those. There are no menus to reach to. You're always looking directly at where you're working. Now notice it missed the N at the end of subscan there. He saw it, he hesitated, but it's the world's first modal
Keep in
system.
mind, this is a sub 1 megahertz computer.
You see every command that's actually being issued, and they're all in the form of direct action.
Complete the diagram from scan.
It's actually surprising how well it's doing.
Oh, yeah.
That was.
I mean,
And
now Alan Kay, the gentleman,
for half an hour in 1968, I felt like I was sticking my hands right through the display and actually touching the information structures
oh, we
directly.
got a couple more seconds here.
System I'd ever used, and practically the only one since that I'd call
I'm
true.
sorry for those only getting the audio version that can't hear this.
So important.
Yeah, it
You can
sounds
go to
terrible.
the YouTube version and see how fabulous this really is.
Yes, if you go
Yeah.
to the go to our show notes for the link, or if you go to itsmoss.com and the history and computing section, and it'll be the origins of the graphical user interface.
But what we'd like you to do is go check out the YouTube channel while you're there. Hit like and subscribe. Go down the list and like all the videos. That'll really help us out a lot.
Yes, you can get the information from their Telegram group and the YouTube channel. And let's see, we can continue on
And
here.
we'd ask you to join our Patreon, but we don't have one yet.
Yeah, Moss was supposed to set that up.
Okay, the RAND tablet developed by the RAND Corporation in 1964, an input device that used the stylus attached to a 10-inch by 10-inch or 255 millimeter by 255 millimeter printed circuit board using capacitive sensors. It looked and functioned like today's drawing tablets, like a Wacom, if you're familiar with that. It had 100 lines per inch or 25.4 millimeters of resolution, capable of digitizing 1 million points. Used handwriting recognition program called Grail. It stood for Graphical Input Language. Grail could identify 53 hand-drawn numbers, letters, symbols, and geometric shapes, able to use gestures to manipulate items on the screen. It inspired the creation of devices like Wacom tablets, Apple Newton, and the Palm Pilot by Palm that used the, I think it was calligraphy, or I can't remember what they used. I used to have a Palm Pilot, but they had the way you draw symbols and it would translate it into letters.
It amazes me that that was there in the 60s. You know,
Oh yeah, the
using
stuff.
very similar technology that we're basically using today.
And Alan Kay, the gentleman that was in that video, he was very instrumental in the development of, I believe it was the, I'm blanking on the name now. It was Small Talk. development platform for the early Macintosh. He developed that, and he was also instrumental in the GUI designs. His list of credentials, just Google Alan K, Alan, and then last name Cay. Or I mean, sorry, Kay.
The lettering for Palm Pilot was called graffiti
Yeah, thank you, Moss. Graffiti.
with only one F.
So, yeah, and what I said during the video, these were sub 1 megahertz computers. We're talking about something where you could pretty much boot the computer up, drive to McDonald's, drive back, and it might be done. So,
Yeah,
if
but that
we-
was most of your like 90s and early 2000s Windows machines too. You turn them on, you go start your coffee, and by the time you're ready to sit down with your drink, you might have booted up.
yeah. So if there's no other comments or discussions, we can move on. All right. This is the meat of the discussion here. Douglas Engelbart, engineer and inventor, joined Stanford Research Institute, known as SRI International, in 1957. You'll notice a lot of these names sound like well-known American universities. It's because that's where they got their start from, like MIT and Stanford. They formed the Augmentation Research Center at the Stanford Research Institute. They created the idea of hypertext, the foundation of how to point and click functions. An icon is a link that refers to another object. Members of the Augmentation Research Center invented the mouse. The first prototype was in 1964. The first public demonstration in 1968. The patent was filed on 1967 and granted in 1970. For your trackball lovers, which I love mine, and I know Moss uses one too. Yeah, and Bill has got one. Well, and everyone has one. Yeah, Joe has one. So, trackball predated the mouse. Actually, there was two inventions from two people in separate countries, a few years apart. The English engineer Ralph Benjamin in 1946 patent filed and granted in 1947, and it was filed in 46, granted in 47, called rollerball. And the British electrical engineer Kenyon Taylor and a team at the Royal Canadian Navy's Digital Automated Tracking and Resolving Project. That was another radar tracking project, but in Canada. It's called DATAR, created their version of the trackball in 1952. Douglas and his team started the Augmentation and Human Intellect project. Douglas was inspired by Vannevar Bush, who wrote an essay, quote, "As We May Think," end quote, in 1945. Let that sink in. At 1945, the end of World War II, around that time. Vannevar, an early engineer, an inventor, and science administrator for the U.S. government, he described an electrical mechanical device called a MEMX, MEMX, what would be tripping over my tongue. It's what we would call a microfilm or a microfiche viewer. And he thought of this before any of this was even invented. I mean, or even the concept of this, which is mind-blowing. Douglas and his team created the on-line system, or NLS, software around 1965. They gained inspiration from this essay. They also created a corded keyboard, also known as a key set. It looks like a 5 key piano. Probably it's about the size, a little bit bigger than the size of your hand, an adult male hand. Each key corresponds to functions in the NLS, and the keys could be pressed separately or combined as if you're playing a chord on a piano. The idea is to use the mouse in your right hand and the key set in your left hand. The keyboard was only meant for typing documents, but there was some special keys on the keyboard that would work with NLS too. Here are a few of the innovations from NLS. Document creation, removal, and editing. Select text and link to other portions of a document or other documents. It's an early form of hypertext linking. Like Tim Berners-Lee got the idea on how to create a hyperlink from this. Edit the document with multiple people remotely, which is the first idea of like a wiki or what some call groupware, like OpenOffice on Nextcloud type of functionality, or Office 365, something like that.
Collaboration. that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
collaboration software. Yes, thank you. Ability to move and resize multiple windows. First time a mouse was used with a graphical terminal. The computer that the NLS used was a Scientific Data Systems 940, SDS 940. The first computer to use time sharing, which meant multiple terminals could be used concurrently. Before time sharing was created, a terminal would take turns using the CPU. So basically, you would type in a command, and then you'd have to wait and wait and wait until it was your turn for it to be processed.
Server client model, almost thin client. We're coming up to that, I assume.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that's the early design of that. Let's see. We did that. They still used multiple cabinets for the CPU and storage, but the size was much smaller. Now we're basically the size of like a mini fridge, maybe about not quite like a half a meter tall, something like that. It's like this all combined, all these components was the size of a city bus. Douglas and his team had public demonstrations on the 9th of December, 1968, historically referred to as the mother of all demos. And we don't have time to show any of this, but search in Google, or YouTube rather, the mother of all demos. You're going to be blown away. I guarantee it. It was held at the Association of the Computer Machinery Institute of Electronics Engineers, ACM/IEEE, Computer Society's Fall Joint Computer Conference in San Francisco, California. And I would have loved to see the sign that had it printed on. It had to have been the size of a car. Douglas's terminal was connected via a home-built 1200 baud modem back to their lab in Menlo Park, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was like 10 or 15 minutes away. See, NASA loaned 2 microwave transmitters, cameras, and a video switcher. These were later used for the moon landing, but they leased it to them for this demonstration.
That is extremely cool.
So that's just the first decade. When I get time to come back on the show again on the podcast, we will talk about the 1970s.
I did go and link in the YouTube video of the Mother of All Demos. That is now in the show notes.
I'm gonna have to check that out. It's amazing, isn't
There
it?
is actually quite a bit of discussion on Wikipedia about it. So If you
No,
want more in depth, go there.
no, yours is just GUIs that you were writing the history of. Do you eventually want to do like the history of the internet and how that developed? Because you have some knowledge of that already, and because you were there for good chunks of it. We were there for good chunks of it because 80s, 90s, 2000s. So are you thinking about that?
Yeah, yeah. I've talked to Moss and I've talked to some other friends about where I'm going. It's this one's more, I guess, really it's not like a foundation. It's more of I'm going to go into the hardware a little bit more because I am a hardware nerd, big hardware geek, and also the history of the internet because I know quite a bit about my readings about how the internet was started. Like here's like a spoiler for a future article. Can you imagine there was a lady in Stanford and at the Stanford Research Institute. She was responsible for maintaining the host file for the entire
The host
internet.
file, yeah.
You would call up and say, "Hi, this is Bob from the something something department at MIT. We want to bring a host online. We want to give it the name Skippy. So it's going to be skippy.mit.edu. Okay, then they would go and FTP, download the host file, put it in Etsy/host, and now everybody on the internet could ping that
That
computer.
location, that new location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have the second chapter of this already on itsmoss.com. We are waiting for Dale to get the time to write the third chapter, and we don't know if there's only three or going to be four.
Okay.
I'm thinking, well, this is going to be the 80s. I'm hoping, because this is just getting too long and drawn out for these articles, I'm hoping after I do the article for the 80s, I'm hoping that I'm able to condense the 90s and the 2000s and the aughts together because pretty much all we have in the aughts was basically Wayland. We had the creation of Xorg, which was ported from X11 release. X11 release, what are we at? Release 6, I
Well,
think.
no, I'm gonna disagree with you there because even if you're talking about just GUI interfaces for computers, the early aughts are the beginning of the cell phones. So
Well,
computers,
The
that
smartphone. Yeah.
that's
And
a
plasma and
different.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different user interface. See, I'm mostly looking at the
just computers, house.
I'm blanking on the acronym, but WIMP, Windows Windows icons, mouse, and something else.
Pointer.
Pointers. Yeah, that's the interface design that I'm focusing on for right now.
Okay.
So pretty much in the 80s, you've got the Commodore, you got GEM, you've got the MiG OS, you have the
Well,
Commodore.
70s, late 70s really started it with the TRS 80,
Yeah.
I think. But then, yeah, the everything else was 80s, early
Yeah.
80s.
And in the 90s, without doing research, I don't think just because I grew up in the 80s, I'm
Pentium,
49, so I grew up with all of that stuff. I don't really remember that much revolutionary stuff in the 90s except for like Windows and OS2.
Windows
America
95, I
Online.
think, was a big thing.
Yeah.
internet in general in the
Yeah.
90s.
Prodigy.
Because
Yeah.
look,
Prodigy.
for those people that weren't born in the 80s, you have to realize something. Almost none of us had cell phones in the 90s. None of us had seen a cell phone until like 98, 99.
Yeah,
Okay.
98, 99. I had my son the other, well, it was about a couple of months ago anyway. He had a
And
school
those,
photograph taken. And when he had his school photograph taken, me and my wife were trying to figure out, which, print to buy. And he just kind of looked at us like, why are you so obsessed about this thing? And I was like, mate, we come from a time where you didn't have a camera in your pocket. And so therefore, when you had these kind of, school photos or year class photos or whatever you'd call it in America, it was a big thing. and he just like different world, different world.
I didn't have a home PC until well, the aughts.
Well, if you go back to television shows, Rockford Files had a real telephone in his car. That was a mobile phone.
Oh yeah, the car phones. Yeah,
Oh,
And that
those
was
yeah,
a
those bricks, the
and that was
giant.
a that was a real thing. That actually had a radio transmitter in it, and it actually went to a central office, and that person would physically take the RCA plug of the audio output from that and physically patch it into the phone network. So they were transmitters,
yeah.
receivers.
They don't do that now.
Look, and we were talking about cell phones in the late '90s, and people are thinking, of the cell phones you have today. No, these were bricks. These were
Yeah.
bricks that you held up to your head.
Yeah,
I remember
the
my dad used to have one of the analog ones, because he had a hearing aid, so he couldn't use the digital ones. That's what he thought anyway. So for the first couple of years, he still had this like big Motorola brick, yeah, which didn't interfere with his hearing aid. And then later, not even that much later, only a couple of years later, when Nokia 3310s were out and stuff like that,
Which
he
was
was able to
also a
use
brick.
the he was able
It
to
was
use
a
the
smaller brick, but you
yeah,
could use that to like break into a car if you really needed
Yeah,
to.
you
and
could.
the
You
battery
could
would be
beat
there for like
somebody
a
to
month.
death with one of them things.
but the one in the car phones in the 1940s and 50s actually had a push to talk button, so it was basically like a Nextel phone from the early 2000s,
Oh my gosh.
and that's how
And the
they
only people that had cell phones from like the mid '90s was drug dealers and doctors.
and
Drug dealers and
pagers
doctors.
It shows how far we've come that in the first season of The Wire, which is only from 2003, so not that long ago, the drug dealers were all using pagers. And that's where the wiretap comes from. I'm just, I mean, it's a fantastic series and whatever, but it just made, when I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to have to explain quite a lot to my son. This is a pager.
Look,
This is how
using
it works.
pagers in the early aughts was still a bit odd. Late '90s, yes, absolutely, use a pager. That was a brilliant device to have. Early aughts, it's definitely time to switch to a flip phone of some kind or a brick of some kind.
Burner
Yeah.
phones.
Well, guys, we're running on pretty long here.
Okay, it was a good conversation though, and we know some of what's coming out for the future. Hopefully, if I get annoyed enough, I'll write the one on the beginnings of the internet.
Yeah. It's always
And
good
we
to have
will hope
someone
to
who
get
actually knows
Dale back
something about
sometime.
something on the show.
Absolutely. Dale, please feel free to come back every time you want to. I know you're also on Distro Hoppers, but if you get time again, come on, do another one of your articles. We will sit here and listen to it all day. We've just proven that.
Yeah, and there's a lot more. That's really what I read was basically the cliff notes of the further detail in the article. And I have YouTube videos for a lot of this stuff, and you have to watch some of these YouTube videos because it's mind blowing when you think they're doing this on a potato.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Well,
where is the article
the
located?
article is on itsmoss.com. It has also been published in Full Circle magazine. The first two segments of the article.
Excellent.
Shameless self-promotion, Amos.
I'm not shameful.
You guys are going to be rich.
Oh, yeah. We make so much. We keep getting contacted by web developers that want to improve our web design and all our mechanics and sales and everything. I'm going, what sales? We don't have
Yeah.
sales. We don't have anything for sale on itsmoss.com. We also don't have enough new articles. So if anyone wants to submit articles for itsmoss.com, please do. We've got nothing happening in the last year except a couple of fill in the blank articles. Dale has a draft of an article there, but obviously no one can read it unless you're one of our admins.
Okay. Well, let's move on so we can wrap this up because there's no vibrations from the ether. Cough, cough. Email us, people. Mintcast at mintcast.org. Yep.
I might email one.
there is no check this out either. So we'll work on that for next time. Get something put in there.
We don't have any ideas this month.
Yep. Things have been slow.
Speak for yourself.
Okay. Okay, on to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post on the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram and Discord. Links are in the show notes. Or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, May 14th, 2023. And there's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. The next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, May the 6th, 2023, with the link in the show notes. Next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, May the 20th, 2023, with a link in the show notes to convert that to your time zone. Live stream information is also available at mintcast.org/livestream. If you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on a couple other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, that's tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Link in the show notes. Moss?
Well, you can hear me every week on Full Circle Weekly News. Approximately every month on Distro Hoppers Digest. You can email me at bardmoss@pm.me. I am on Mastodon as @Zyvola@hosttux.social, and my other contact information can be found at itsmoss.com.
And if you want to get in contact with me, I'm bill@mintcast.org, Bill_H on Discord. I'm at WCHauser3 at fosstodon.org on Mastodon, at WCHauser3 on Twitter, and WC on Hauser3 on Facebook as well. Also check out my other podcasts, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. Majid?
And if you want to listen to me, my voice, or contact me, you can always get me at drmajid@mintcast.org. I'm on at Atypical Doctor on Twitter, Atypical Anesthetist on Instagram, and the Atypical Anesthetist podcast is available on Spotify. Links in the show notes.
And for more from me, I'm Dale_CDL at pm.me, Distro Hoppers Digest podcast. And we write articles on itsmoss.com.
Okay, before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Someone for the audio editing, we're not quite sure who yet. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hobstar for our logo, and RD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time sinks. Bill Hauser for hosting the server which runs our website, website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio, and a lot of our audio editing recently. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co. Okay.
And it's a wrap.
So,
31842 on mine.
31844.
31855.
31853. So, about the editing.
Well, let's see if that one guy wants to help out. Since he says he can't make the show and he still wants to help out, let's see if he wants to do the editing.
Do I export it as an OGG?
FLAC.
FLAC.
You're going to export audio. It's just going to
Okay.
say export audio.
Fine, got you.
Well, I don't think it's a good idea to believe that he's going to do this episode this
Okay.
week. You think you could do this one?
I can try. I don't
Is
know.
it 24-bit or
It's-
16-bit?
Give me the best you got.
24-bit.
And level 8, is it?
8. My time is a bit difficult, but I can try. I mean, I can try and work on it tomorrow night.
Oh, crap.
Are we splitting this episode?
Yeah, we're gonna have to. It's 3 freaking hours.